morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for another edition of your favorite guilty pleasure on the internet, U.S. soccer with two men from the U.K. What a concept. I love it. Seriously, right? So, anyways, I want to thank everybody for tuning in for the Saturday morning Spurs edition here on Stateside Footy. Of course, I'm your host, Steve Silver, and joining me today from the Irish Hotspur is Dave Harris. Good morning, Dave. How are you doing?
No, good morning, Steve. Hopefully you're keeping well. I was supposed to be here last week, but wasn't too well. So glad to be here today, my man. I owe you one, so thank you very much.
And I appreciate you making time, and I certainly hope you're feeling better this week. You've been a little under the weather so far in 2025, so I hope you're getting on a little bit better this week.
Yeah.
Also joining us from Spurs Diehards TTID is Drew Zilla. Good morning, Drew. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, bud? I'm doing well, thank you, sir. Doing well. Good to see you. Good to see Mr. Harris, as always. So looking forward to chatting Spurs. It always amazes me. It doesn't matter how early I seem to get up each day or any day. I think to myself, I'm not going to be able to do this. And then as soon as I hear music and the computer comes on and stuff, I'm like, okay, let's talk football. So it's all good.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to first off by saying, make sure you like and subscribe because this channel is definitely growing. And I'm actually happy because we got a little new background logo and of course the new theme song as well too. And there was nothing better than bangers from the U.S. men's national team to open up my Saturday morning. Listen, there's just certain things that just bring a smile to my face, and seeing absolute bangers from Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan, that's just the best, man. So, all right. So let's go ahead and dive into it because we do have a few news and notes, things that transpired over the week, and let's go ahead and dive into it. First and foremost, the young man Lucas Bergvall signs an extension, tying his development to Tottenham Hotspur. And I think this is two things. Number one, first and foremost, congratulations to Lucas Bergvall. He'll stay at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium until at least 2031. This gives them an absolute raise, but it also means that if Tottenham Hotspur decide in the future to part ways with Lucas Bergvall, it means his resale value potentially goes through the roof, meaning that it's a win-win for everyone involved. So first and foremost, let's start with Mr. Dave Harris. Your thoughts on Mr. Bergvall's extension?
Look, Bergvall's, I think, has earned his new contract extension, to be honest with you, and it's good to see that it's a long-term extension. Now, this can be viewed two ways. You look at the problems that Tottenham might find themselves in this summer, whether they're able to act or not. I think, one, it sort of increases the value of Bergvall if anyone is thinking about coming in and making a bid. But also, he was only on 15K, so I presume he's probably tripled his wages, I would argue, maybe off the back of this season, which means any potential suitors coming in for him then, there won't be that urgency for him to jump ship unless they're willing to maybe match the wages or, again, double them. So I think it sort of future-proofs Tottenham and Bergvall at Tottenham to a certain degree. But then I also question, is there a lot of interest in the guy? And I've seen smaller clubs do this. That's why they give the guys the new contract so that they can get much more of a transfer fee out of it. With the news that come out, we're not quite sure what the reasons behind the Bergvall extension, but from his own personal point of view, he has certainly earned that. I mean, this guy came in from the Swedish second division. He was on the periphery of the team, at the early stages of the season. Went out to Galatasaray, really looked like a boy in a man's world. But I remember saying that game, he was really. Like, they really made him look like a boy that night. But I remember saying that night as well on the back of the watch-along that it's a great learning curve for someone like Bergvall. Things like that where, they're coming in and picking the ball off him. And it now shows him what he needs to do in order to protect that ball and stuff like that. And I think he's certainly benefited from that night out in Galatasaray. And he's come on leaps and bounds so much to the point where he's one of the undroppable names in that field. So, fair play to him. He's really earned a new contract, and I think it's a shining light to anybody. If you come here and you're willing to do the right things, continue to develop, you live your life right. You haven't seen anything about him being out at darts and all these other things going on this season. And he's probably look at the reward he's come out with at the end of it. And I think his work ethic alone is what's endeared him into the Spurs fans' hearts as well. We see a lot of players over the last few years come here, maybe not putting in 100% effort or not trying. This guy has done that, and I think he's really, that work ethic endeared himself into the Spurs fan base so much to the point that we're actually willing to give him time to develop. Everyone knows he's nowhere near the finished article, but people want him in the lineup week in, week out, and they're willing to give him that to develop, which I think, you know, speaks volumes to Lucas Bergvall, because you look at a lot of other players, they don't seem to get that good grace from the fan base. You know, the fan base don't really give them too long. So I think massive credit to Bergvall. And, you know, for an 18-year-old kid to come here this season and be the shining light in what is such a shit show at Tottenham Hotspur as well, actually speaks to maybe the mentality of the guy. And that's why I think many people also think that he's like, as they sort of agree with what Glenn Hoddle said, that this guy, you know, if you look how good he is now, imagine what he's going to be like when he's 22, 23, 24 years of age. And I think many people subscribe to that notion as well, with given that his consistent performances compared to some of the senior players around the football club and stuff like that. You know, I think he's completely earned it, and fair play. If it is a case that Tottenham are looking to keep this guy and they're not just looking to increase what they can get for him, I think he is certainly one of the guys in the midfield at his age that you could look at and say, right, let's sort of build around this. Let's get the right components around this.
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing though is, and I've seen this time and time again, especially with young players, that when they actually get the extension, when they get a little taste of the money, they tend to take their foot off the gas a little bit. And that's my only worry. It's all of a sudden complacency comes through the door. The comfortability comes through the door, because now they essentially can get whatever they want. That for me, that's a little bit of a scary notion. But that being said, though, one of the things that I like about him, as you mentioned this, is the fact that his development has increased so rapidly over the course of 4 or 5 months that he's become almost a little bit of the engine in the midfield. That dude's motor, that dude's ability to get in 1v1 challenges and come away victorious. It's something I don't think I've ever seen really from an 18-year-old midfielder in the Premier League. You might see it in other leagues around the world, but definitely not the Premier League. It definitely seems like it's a little bit of an outlier. Drew, let's get to you now. First and foremost, when you heard the news that Lucas Bergvall got his extension, what were the first things that crossed your mind?
Finally the club are doing something, like tying this guy down. I mean, I know he was already on a decent contract, so it's not like we were likely to lose him anytime soon. But I mean, I think it shows that the club understand how good potentially he can be. I think a couple of standout moments for me was there was a couple of moments where, was it him that pointed out to Bentancur to come and say thank you to the fans after a terrible loss? I think he showed real age, you know, or real maturity beyond his years. And things like that sort of stand out. And I know, Steve, you mentioned the issue or the concern with once they get a little bit of a taste of money and things like that. And I just don't, with Bergvall, I just think he's one of those sort of anomalies that's a little different. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I've got a feeling, isn't it, his mum and dad were professional sports people to a certain extent.
They're all over living with him as well.
Yeah, and I just think it runs in the family. I just think all of them have probably got that mentality monster mentality where, you know, if you don't go looking for the money, you go and be the person and the player and the prospect that you can be. You get better and better because that's just what you are. That's how you've been made, and the money follows people like that.
Correct.
You don't have to chase it, you know. So if his parents are going to keep him in line, sounds like his younger brother is starting to follow the same sort of path. You just see it with this kid. I mean, it's Maddison mentioned it in his presser the other day. As soon as he got there, he was buzzing around like a bee. Do you know what I mean? Just wanting to be up in everybody, just asking questions, just integrating himself. That's one word you don't hear very. You know, some players, they're there for a living and they're there to do their job, and some players you feel that they want to be part of more than just their 9 to 5. Do you know what I mean? And I just get that vibe from him. I know he's been hanging around a lot with Kulusevski. I don't know if anyone else knows, but when he signed his contract, he already looks bigger. Like you can see he's been in the gym.
Yep.
That's only going to benefit him from a strength point of view, from being able to carry the ball. Like you say, 23, 24 years old, you just wonder what he could potentially be. And this is one of those things, right? I'm already kind of at the point where I'm like, if this guy's here for 6, 7, 8 years, like I don't want this guy to leave. I want us to build the next 2 teams around him. Do you know what I mean? I think he's that good. I think you put him in the young prospects team with your Pedris and your Yamals, and like he's in that group of up and coming young teenagers. Go on, Dave.
I think a great point you make, in answer to Steve's question about, you worry, because Steve is right to pose that question, right? He's got that sort of contract now. He's going to be on decent wages. Will the lifestyle sort of take him away from the focus? But I would argue, if he went for the money, he would have went to Barcelona. I do think that him and his camp sort of thought about it and saw themselves getting into the Tottenham team quicker, then into that Barcelona team, getting more game in the Tottenham team at his young age, which is what you need when you're a young player developing. You need game time. You need a manager that's going to trust you. And I think he's pinpointed Tottenham as getting more game time at this young age. And I think, to Drew's point, I think he backs himself. If I go here, I perform well, and everything else, the lifestyle, the money, and everything, that'll all follow. But I think, from my understanding, he's got his parents around him, and that they really do sort of keep a good eye on him, and I don't think they will let this guy get carried away. I think they'll keep him in line, to a large degree. And I just think Drew's point is absolutely spot on. If he was chasing the money, he would have went out to Barcelona. They would have been able to give him more than what we were offering, and I'm sure once they got wind he was coming to Tottenham, they would have contacted his camp and said, right, we'll beat their wages or double whatever Tottenham's offering you. And I think the guy's looked after his own career and his own development by coming to Tottenham, knowing he would get more game time, and it would be easier to break into the Tottenham team than Barcelona team. Because this is one thing that annoys me sometimes with youngsters. Sometimes I see a 17, 18-year-old make this big, massive step up to, in years gone by, to the likes of your Chelsea's, and never ever going to get into team, never ever going to get game time. And then all of a sudden there has, no one speaks about them for 2-3 years. They're being loaned out here, there, and everywhere. And it's not what you want. Like, if you're signing that a 17, 18-year-old and you're moving to a club, it's got to be within a view of taking that next step, that next development. It's something that happens a lot with Irish players going over to England. They're playing here in the League of Ireland. They go to England. They're playing in academy football, and they can't handle it. It's such a step down and stuff like that. And they end up losing their way, to the point where they're coming back to the League of Ireland and they're 23, 24 years of age, and they're never, ever going to get back to England at that point. So it's sort of like, I think Bergwall's took the right step in his career there. I think Drew's absolutely spot on.
Quick question before we move on. Do you think Lucas Bergwall has passed Archie Gray in the development curve? Because during the summer transfer window, Archie Gray was billed as that essentially ready-made prospect, having all the first team minutes with Leeds, being able to play multiple positions, as we've seen. But over the course of this, as the season evolved, you've seen Lucas Bergwall get far more minutes than Archie Gray, especially over the last couple of months. So that begs the question, especially with the new contract, does that signify that Lucas Bergwall has passed Archie Gray on that developmental curve?
Look, I think Lucas Bergwall had the bigger scope for development when coming here, because he was a relative unknown. He's coming from the Swedish second division, and it's a massive step up. So if he could accelerate quickly, it was always going to get more recognition than someone like Archie Gray, because Archie Gray, like you said, we sort of signed as an 18-year-old ready to go now. And look, I think how the season has panned out, maybe it can look like that, but I make the argument when it comes to Archie Gray. I know everyone's unhappy that he's played across the back line, but I actually think it signifies the player that he is, how good he actually is. The fact that the manager has looked at all of his midfield options when he's had trouble in defence. He's looked at Bissouma, Bentancur, Bergwall, and Archie Gray, and he says, do you know what? Archie Gray is the guy that I think can do a job in that back line for me. Trust me, a manager ain't going to just pick anybody to sit in there. He's going to pick the best option that he thinks can handle and do that job. And so the fact that he's come in, he's played right back, he's played left back, and he's played a large stint of his Tottenham career so far at centre back, I actually think speaks to the volume that the trust that the manager has in Archie Gray and how good he actually thinks he is. Because I'm telling you now, if I'm a manager, I'm not just picking my most experienced midfielder or whatever just to put him in there. I'm picking who I think I can trust to actually not let me down, you know, because it's a huge ask asking a guy to go from midfield into centre-back or even into fullback. It's a complete different game. So you've got to put a player in there that you believe can fill in and do the job and minimise the damage. And Archie Gray has done that to a plumb. And for me, I think, you know, he's been unfortunate due to circumstances, due to the amount of injuries we've got across the back line. Someone was going to have to step in there, and Archie Gray has. And I actually think in the long run, the fact that he's played centre-back, the fact that he's played sort of full-back, I think it'll help him in the long run in that CDM role, because then when he moves into that CDM role, not only is he going to be thinking like a midfielder, he's also going to have the thought process of a defender, so that'll help his positioning, putting him in positions to be able to break up plays and stuff like that. I think it'll actually evolve him massively as a player. It's something that Ajax actually do throughout their academy. When they're bringing players through, they don't just play them in the one position in the academy. So if they've got a centre midfielder, they'll play him in different positions in the back line, in the forward line, so that when they are on the ball, they know exactly, they've played out wide, so they know exactly what the winger's looking for. They've played up front, so they know what ball, what service the striker's looking for. You know, if you're a defensive midfielder and you play the back line, you know what cover they're looking for, etc., etc. That's how Ajax develop a lot of their players, and look at the model that they've successfully done over the years. How many players do they sell on for massive money and stuff like that? How many clubs go looking at Ajax players, you know, and stuff like that? So I actually think, to a large degree, it's going to massively stand to Archie Gray in the long run. People may be forgetting about him this year. Next year is when we'll see the benefit.
I do not disagree. Drew, you want to come in on this before we move
on?
Yeah,
there's pretty much said it all. The one thing I will say with Archie Gray, I think to your point, for sure, I think there's an argument that Bergvall has maybe surpassed him just because, to Dave's point, he's come from the second division in Sweden. And I think where Archie Gray was here and Bergvall was here, they've kind of gone, and
that's
one slightly overtaken.
That's because Archie Gray hasn't been given his chance in the midfield.
Exactly.
And
he's whereas
Bergvall and go, you can play centre back. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Whereas Bergvall's been able to shine, arguably, in his best position. Archie Gray's played utility. And here's the thing: like, I think he's played really, really well at centre back, better than I thought he would.
Yeah,
he's not.
100%.
There's a couple of times at right back I don't think he's done particularly well. I don't think he's got the pace for it. And there's been a couple of times, the couple of times that he had. I mean, last week was a little bit, and I don't know how I feel about it. He was pushed under the bus. I just think it is what it is. But last week against Liverpool, you obviously saw that he's not ready to play a 6 against an absolute top tier team. Like, I think.
Isn't that harsh though?
What do you mean?
The reason why I ask is that harsh, Drew, because every player was off it. You know, it can't just be on him to put in that performance and shine. It's a team game. Yeah. As a CDM, if your centre-backs are dropping that line deep the way Ben Davies does because he doesn't have the pace, you know, even though it's not instruction, your fullbacks are saving themselves to a degree for midweek. Players ahead of you are saving themselves. What do you actually expect the guy to do to a large degree?
No, that's absolutely a valid point. And I was looking at him more in isolation, not really at the team. So I mean, the whole thing was a bit of a shit show last week. So I completely take that on board for sure.
This coming from the chat from Niall O'Connor. Can you see Gray being our main CDM considering the noise surrounding Betancourt and Basuma? I don't know how you guys feel, but I think this is going to be Basuma's last season in the Tottenham Hotspur uniform. That being said, Betancourt is probably going to. Ish.
If he plays, I tell you what, if he does that performance 6 or 7 more times,
are we going to
offer him a year extension?
Here's where I don't.
Are we going to forget? Are we going to forget the 3-4 months of absolutely crappy ass football that Basuma gave us for the one performance where he stood up a little bit?
I'm just asking the hard questions. That's all.
Where I have a problem with it, I think it's the same case as Ben Davies to a large degree. Why are these players leaving it so late
to perform?
To start performing? towards towards the end of their contracts. And the reason why is if you're Ben Davies, right, look at the age he's at. He's not going to get 80 grand a week anywhere else. He leaves Tottenham, his wages are going to dramatically decrease. And you probably argue he's not even going to get Premier League move. He's probably going to get a championship move, which means he's going to have to take probably more than a 50% reduction in his wages.
Right.
It's a massive sort of lifestyle drop and stuff like that. And it's just, when it comes to Ben Davies, like, don't get me wrong, I've been on his case the last 3 to 4 years, and I've openly said, look, he's been a lot better this year. He has been.
Right.
But I even look at that Liverpool game and stuff like that, and it's just like he clearly doesn't have the legs anymore to play in the back line at the Premier League level and stuff. And it's like he's only performing now because he's motivated to keep his 80k a week for another year or two, going into 34, 35 years of age. I look at Bissouma. Where has he been the last 3 years? He earned his move from Brighton to a step up to a club like Tottenham because the way he's playing. All of a sudden gets the big wages, completely demotivated. Now all of a sudden there's speculation around his future because reality is if he leaves Tottenham, he might get lucky and get a move out to Saudi and get a good lifestyle. But if he doesn't, he's going to end up taking lower wages again somewhere else. So it's sort of like he's motivated right now for the money, but then as soon as he signs that contract extension, he is the sort of player that will just sit back again. You know what I mean? And that's my problem. We've had too many of them at Tottenham's down the years. For me now, the way I'm starting to operate with the players, to a certain degree, it's a 2-year policy. You come in here, first season, I can maybe, as long as it's not a disaster, I can say, right, settling period, developmental period. The second year is where I say, right, you perform or you're fucking out of this football club. Because we can't keep going down the routes like we did with your Lo Celsos and players like that, where you're keeping them around for so long, you're offering them contract extensions, and you're looking at it like, for what? Where's the contribution be? Because once you do that, realistically, your best players, it actually allows them to take a step back. Because then they go, why am I putting all this effort? Why am I doing all of this? If they're getting rewarded for that, I'll just do half of what I'm doing, and I'm still here.
Was Bissouma? Sorry to keep on this subject for a second, but was Bissouma Conte? Was he a Nuno signing that became Conte?
Let me think. He's been here.
I can't quite remember.
No, I think he came in under Conte.
Yeah, I think he
came in under Conte, but Conte didn't want him and never fancied him. So he was a club signing?
Let me check.
Because Conte was on the record as basically saying this guy doesn't, do you know what I mean? This guy can't concentrate. He doesn't do. So, and just the point I was just trying to make is, you come in, and it's the same with a lot of our players. You come in under one manager and we're such a shit show that 2-3 managers later, you're standing there going, well, what am I supposed to be doing? What system am I playing? Do you know what I mean? So to a certain extent, I can understand the frustration. But, I get your point. Why does it have to wait until this point? But then, I don't know, the counter argument I would make to that is you've been kind of pushed around from pillar to post. You've never really been made to feel like part of it. You obviously, I don't know, I've got some issues because you went off and huffed balloons in the summer.
Well, Postecoglou put his arm around him, didn't he? Postecoglou showed him a hell of a lot of love when he walked in there. He
100%.
basically said, "You're my number one."
Yeah,
in that
no, that's true. That's true.
He let him down. I think for the first 10 games he was on fire. Then he went and got sent off against Luton. I think then he came back. He got sent off then against Nottingham Forest. We didn't see him then because he went out to AFCON. Came back. There was huge problems around.
He had malaria
from there. Stuff like that. Then he comes into this season with a point to prove, knowing that he's got 2 years left on his contract. Then it's coming up to about that time, and then he's coming into this season huffing balloons. And I mean, anyone wonder why we're sitting where we are in the Premier League to a large degree? You got players at the darts, you got players huffing balloons, players bringing fucking pillows on VIP planes. It's honestly, and we wonder why we are where we are, and we think these players aren't in their comfort zone. Of course they are. It stinks of it. And the thing is, they haven't even earned their right. And to be honest with you, it's not even about earning your right. Teams that win things, teams that have ambitions of, competing on multiple fronts every season, they don't hit the comfort zone. That's why they're there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
You know what?
As a matter of fact, there's expectation levels, not just on the pitch with play, but also how you conduct yourself inside the training center, and also when you take your show on the road. There are certain behavior expectation level that I actually believe that there's this old saying, and that's the prisoners are running the prison. You know what I mean?
The inmates running the asylum kind of vibe.
Yeah, there you go.
I think. Do you know what? I think the club have actually got in my head and scarred me, right? Because the reason that I think I try and argue this point, or just try and argue a point, number one, I'm interested to see what people think. But number two, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, all right, they're going to get rid of Basuma. What do we get that's equal or better to for the money that we're going to get for him, knowing that the club rarely invests more than they get back for a player? Do you know what I mean? So I think in my head, I'm like, well, we can't get rid of him, because even though we should get rid of him, this club isn't going to replace him with equal or better. We're going to get equal or lesser. And that's what scares me. It's like, I don't necessarily want him, but my concern is the club won't do anything. You know, it'll just be it'll be almost be like a like for like. We'll get rid of him, but then we'll get somebody in that's essentially the same. And you're like, well, why fucking bother? Why? Do you know what I mean? So I think I've got a little bit of PTSD in my head from the club.
I understand what you're saying there, and to a degree, I sort of hold that same opinion. But I think with what Basuma has demonstrated, I do think he's a player that you can look at and go, I'd take that gamble. And when it comes to someone like Romero, it's like, I mean, it shouldn't even be a conversation. But when it comes to someone like Basuma and what he's demonstrated, the behaviors he's demonstrated and stuff like that, it's like, well, I would take that gamble, because if you bring in a player that's even on a similar level, but he's more focused, you know, it will stand more to you as a football team. And the thing is, look, I think Basuma is a good player. I just don't think he's got the personal drive to want to be the best. And I think that's where the problem comes in. Like on the football pitch, he's like, when he's on it, he is usually man of the match. He's absolutely superb. But when he's not on it, he becomes very costly for this football team. And when I actually look back, especially over the course of just this season alone, in pivotal moments where you think, win this game, we can kick on, he's actually cost Tottenham Hotspur, North London Derby, Chelsea game. Out in Rangers, after apologising to Spurs fans for what he done in the Chelsea game, he was piss poor, you know, stuff like that. And it's like, a lot of what he's done on the pitch has actually been detrimental compared to actually great performances. And that's why I just look at the guy and go, look, we've given you every opportunity. You know, we can sit here like, you know, look, don't get me wrong. Do we use Basuma in the right way? Probably not. I think Basuma is a player that you need to give a free role in the midfield too, where you're not asking him to be more disciplined in that CDM role. But the reality is he doesn't affect games going forward good enough to give him that free license, which means it's on him to adapt. In order to get into a top team or top midfield, it's up to him to adapt and nail down one role, and he doesn't seem to want to do it. He wants that free role without being good enough. So for me, a player like that, combined with the attitude issues, I'd rather take the gamble and try.
And I think when it comes to replacement, the financials of it, like for like, Drew, with a guy like Johnny Cardoso, financially it would be like for like, but the issue is, you know for a fact that the development of Basuma has come to a point where you know exactly what you're going to get with a guy like Cardoso, who's kind of an unknown because he's a young commodity with an incredibly high ceiling. So from that point, it's actually not a like for like. It's actually a little bit less, and you're actually going to have to spend more time and money developing to get to a certain level, which is something I can actually see this club doing, taking a chance on the high ceiling.
Yeah, the Villa game just kicked off, and I guess, you know, just for argument's sake, right? You would probably suggest that Basuma technically is a far better player than McGinn, but you take McGinn every day of the week, right? Because they're kind of they're you know, do you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, exactly your point. You know, you might not have somebody that's got exactly the same level of technicals, but McGinn will blood, sweat, and tears it for any team he's playing for, whereas Basuma maybe doesn't. So I get your point entirely.
The biggest problem is there's a tremendous amount of professional athletes that get to a certain level and are happy being those type of players, right? That are happy being a Premier League player and won't give out the extra efforts to become a better player, to become a world-class player. They are just comfortable and complacent being a Premier League player. But let's move on a little bit. There is breaking news that I think that landed yesterday, that Fabio Paratici, the Don, the exalted one, the savior of Tottenham Hotspur, has agreed to return to Tottenham Hotspur, spurning AC Milan. Apparently that was the report. Coming back as the director of football, which means that Johan Lang and Scott Munn are out the door, you would probably assume. First and foremost, Dave, when I heard this news, you were the first person I thought about. So I quickly sent you a message a little bit and just said, hey, listen, man, the Don is back. First and foremost, what does this mean for Tottenham Hotspur as far as the transfer strategy? Just as far as planning wise, you would probably assume that some things have changed since he left, but that being said, the core of what he brought in is technically still around. It almost feels like he's coming back to finish the job that he started.
Well, I mean, the core of what he brought in is the core of what the 11 that the manager uses today is the core of our best players. Yes. You know what I mean? And you look at Johan Lang, yes, some of these players have had a slight impact, but nowhere near the impact that maybe some of the Paratici signings have. And this is something that I've argued, since Johan Lang's been in the job. I think there's levels to this job, and I think Paratici demonstrated for me, the big thing that Paratici demonstrated for me is that he could speak to Levy in the way that Levy needs to be spoken to. And what I mean by that is, notoriously, Daniel Levy didn't really care about the academy to a large degree. But Paratici said, you've got to start caring about the academy. You got to start doing things right because, people wonder how the likes of Man City get away with what they're doing. Well, what no one speaks about is the amount of money that they've sold their academy players for over the last couple of years. It's not one thing that gets highlighted. Southampton have sold a lot of academy players over the years and stuff like that. It can top your transfer budget up. It's another way of you making revenue. Straight away, Daniel Levy's gone brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. More revenue, class. He also, when there hasn't been great amount of money left in the transfer budget, he's been able to get Kulu. Bring him in now, pay later. Same with Pedro Porro and players like that, to be able to stretch the budget. Just give us that little bit extra in the window to try and help us. Not only that, he brought in the data-led transfer strategy and stuff like that. But not only that, he was able to bring in some players for the here and now. Like, we didn't go as young as 18-year-olds. Like, he was able to bring in like 20, 22, 23, 24-year-olds, players that have a bit of experience behind them. Actually, when they come into the Premier League, it's actually helped them sort of hit the ground running a little bit. And for me, I think he's had the toughest job of all. When he walked in here, and this is where he never got enough credit at Tottenham, when he walked in here, he had so many players like your Sanchez's and all of that on 80-odd K a week, 70-odd K a week, and the clubs that we're trying to sell to can nowhere near offer them the wages that we have offered them and the contracts that we have them on. So, and they also don't have the money that we were looking to recoup for them. So it was very hard to sort of get rid of a lot of this squad because it needed to happen to be able to give us, reduce the transfer wage that we can use that to reinvest in the future and stuff like that. He had a very, very tough job of players at Tottenham that were on the decline, were on massive money, and was so hard to shift off. People go, oh, yeah, well, Johan Lang come in and got rid of like 14 players. Yeah, but how many of their contracts were run down by Paratici? No one interested. Okay, well, I still don't want you around the football club. Go out on loan here for a year there and everything else. It's not his fault that Tottenham couldn't recoup fees for their players. He was trying to clear up a bad job that Steve Hitchen had got Tottenham into. He was trying to clear up that mess. Also, while trying to rebuild the squad with the right players and stuff like that. And not only that, people go, sometimes have given Steve Hitchen a free pass and, before, same with Johan Lang. Well, he is operating under Daniel Levy's restraints. Okay, you think Paratici wasn't? The thing is, Paratici was able to speak to Levy. He was able to get more juice from the squeeze and stuff like that because it's the way he spoke to Daniel Levy. He was able to put it into the money context where Daniel Levy understands that's why you're doing this, that's why you're doing that. So there's so many reasons. And not only that, a lot of the great youngsters that have come through over the last 2-3 years at Tottenham Hotspur, notoriously before that, players were walking away from Tottenham and signing on elsewhere to the point where Tottenham were being back-linked with them, for like 40-50 million pound a pop. Paratici went to Daniel Levy and said, look, you need to stop doing what you're doing, because with the academy, basically, the firm belief was pay them little and make them earn it. But then as soon as anyone came interested, they were like, I'm signing that contract. I'm out of here. I'm never going to get this at Tottenham. But Paratici said, look, if you want to keep your best players around here, your best youngsters, which you need to, because you can't keep registering 4 or 5 goalkeepers to get through the homegrown crisis when we're on Europe. you need to start paying them properly. We've done that. All of a sudden, they're signing on the dotted line. They're staying around this football club and stuff like that. You know, when they come, they go, oh, but, you know, he got it wrong with Nuno. I mean, Nuno's proven to not be a bad manager, right? You know, people go, he's got it wrong with Conte. Well, Conte is proven not to be a bad manager. In fact, he's nearly winning silverware at Napoli. So, actually, a lot of the people that Paratici brought to this club actually done well at this football club. Brought Gabonini in with them and stuff like that. The reality is, it's just this football club is a problem. But you even look at Johan Lang, you know, this guy has had 3 windows to help Postecoglou. And this is where I think it's gone wrong massively this season on the ranch. Last January, when we had the AFCON, Son was out at the Asian Cup as well. And we had a load of injuries. Postecoglou needed help. We brought in Timo fucking Werner and Radu Dragusin. So he gets by, go into the summer, you're like, right, now's the time. 3, 4, 5 quality players if we can. Let's kick on. We go down a route where we're bringing in all these youngsters, you know, and I could see the alarm bell started ringing for me straight away. I could see the disaster we're walking into. Then this January coming into it, Postecoglou spoke about the need of leadership, you know, in the squad, which means you have to go and buy that. He frequently asked for help in January. He mentioned the forward line a couple of times and stuff like that. What do we go and do? We go and sign more youngsters. I mean, when we're in the positions we are and we're only bringing in youngsters, how the hell is that going to help Tottenham in the predicament we're in when you're bringing in guys that you need to develop along a journey? And if you're looking to bring in guys to develop, you've got to be in the right frame to be able to do that. Teams have got to be going well if you really want to maximize their potential. But when you're bringing these guys in to fix everything that's gone wrong on the football pitch because of injuries and everything else, you are always setting the guy up for failure. And that's where I think a lot of it's gone wrong under Johan Lang. I think he knows how to sell the Premier League dream to people that have that dream, but he doesn't know how to sell Tottenham Hotspur. And that's what you have to do when you're going after players 24, 25 years of age. You've got to convince them that the next 5 year, that 5-year contract they're signing, this club is going in the right direction and this is the club that they need to come to. He has failed in that aspect so many windows. And I'm absolutely delighted that Paratici is signing back on the dotted line. Look, it's not Daniel Levy's fault that the ban came about. He had to do something about it. Look, I don't think he should have ever gone for Johan Lang in the first place. You look at how Aston Villa kicked on since they've got rid of him. They brought in Munchie. Look at the signings they're making to elevate the squad for the manager and stuff like that. That's why Johan Lang has to go and Paratici has to come back in here.
You know, Drew, now if reports are to be true that Tottenham are going to be in a position where they have to sell before they have to buy, Paratici is going to have a little bit of a dilemma on his hands, considering that for a guy like Richarlison, who has been constantly injured, you know, the reports are that he wants to stay in the Premier League, but he's almost an unsellable player because to the fact that well, quite frankly, he can't stay on the pitch, or a guy like Yves Bissouma. Who has consistently regressed in his Tottenham Hotspur career. That being said, if that is if those reports are to be true, and when you look at the players who are most likely going to be earmarked for sale, a lot of these players have problems, and so the resale value on some of these players are going to be tricky to move. What do you think that Paratici's strategy is going to be to try to trim the fat off this roster?
I don't think we know the answer to that until at the very least the 22nd of this month, after we've played in the final, because there are 2 very, very distinct pathways for this club. There's the path where we qualify for Champions League, and I mean, there isn't necessarily a windfall directly from that. I mean, you win the prize money for the Europa League, you don't get more money for qualifying, but you know that you have the windfall to come from next year. So you can at least bank on, the revenue from the 8 extra games as well as what's to come.
But that's going to be next year, though, right?
Right, exactly. So this year, I mean, he's either going to have to. I think it's two pretty stripped down versions, to be honest. You've got the really, really stripped down version where maybe a couple of these players actually have to hang around, even though we don't want them to. And he has to be really clever. And you basically do how when you're trying to pay off your credit cards and you go the one with the least balance to the one with the most balance, and you just pay off the least one, you pay off the least one, you pay off. We're just maybe going to have to do that and just get rid of a couple. I mean, the hope is that we qualify and there's a little bit more breathing room. I mean, Paratici being Paratici, I think he's probably got a couple of aces in his pocket, right? He's going to. I think we, as a club, have a big issue when it comes to loaning quality players. I think other teams seem to be able to do it. I'm even take Aston Villa, for example. I mean, right, unfortunately, Rashford looks like he might have been injured for the rest of the season, but they managed to loan in Rashford and Asensio.
Yeah.
When have we ever loaned in players of that sort of caliber? Like, it usually ends up, I mean, apart from Gareth Bale, but even that, he was sort of, in the prime, in the twilight of his career, although he scored 16 goals. But I think we miss a trick sometimes. There's a couple of players out there that would do a job for us that we probably could get on the loan. And the likes of your Paraticis over your Langers, I think would probably be more inclined to be able to get those jobs done or get those deals over the line, like your Bentancur and your Kulusevskis. So I just think I'm inclined to agree that the club, having watched a few videos, having looked at the numbers and having the sick understanding that I have in terms of like cash flow, I don't think we're going to be able to go out and spend, 200, 300 million. I'd love it. I just don't see it being a thing. So I think he's going to be clever. He's going to call in some favors. You might get a couple of youngsters and you might get a couple of veterans, but we're not going to, I don't think he's going to go crazy.
The reason why I asked that, Dave, is because we have seen Paratici over the last couple of months on the road at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and I'm assuming Daniel Levy has already let him into Hotspur way to evaluate trading as well too. So you would probably assume that there is a strategy in place for when he actually steps into that role and he can hit the ground running. And if that is players exiting first, I would probably assume there has to be some sort of strategy in place to actually maximize the value on some of these resales, knowing that potentially some of these guys are damaged goods. I would probably assume that the only guy that actually has been able to make it through the season without significant injury is Manor Solomon at Leeds. I know that Brian Hill down in Spain actually suffered an injury that had him out for a couple of months. So a lot of these guys come with are kind of labeled damaged goods a little bit, and so the resale is probably not going to be significantly high.
No, it's not. So I think, look. The reality of the situation is I don't think Daniel Levy comes out with that we have to buy before we buy and all that sort of nonsense. If he's got investment or a takeover's happening, I don't think he comes out with it. So I think the reason why he's coming out with it is clear. He hasn't. You've got to remember, this guy's been chasing investment since like 2021. You know what I mean? So I think the fact that he's coming out with it means he hasn't got it. And this whole thing about a takeover, he's never ever wanted to sell. He's just looked for investment. That's all he's ever been looking for. So it's clear to me that he hasn't got it lined up. Now that there's still potential for that to change, but as of now, it stinks that he hasn't got it lined up down the line. Which then means to me, you need a very shrewd director of football. Let's not forget, Daniel Levy was a fan of this guy when we signed him. He said, "I've been watching this guy for the last decade. I'm a big fan of him. I can't wait to bring him into this football club." And I think the plan, look, me personally, I always think the plan was to bring him back after his ban. I've always said, back when he got the ban, I've always said as soon as that ban is coming to an end, they need to bring him straight back in here, because I think he was doing a good job at Tottenham at the time. And I think it comes down to, two things. Paratici has demonstrated that he can get players in here on a loan with an obligation to buy. That will help us out massively this summer. To Drew's point, he'll probably be able to help us actually get us in the room with PSG to be able to negotiate a loan deal for one of their superstars that maybe are on the periphery of the squad. That honestly, connections in the game matter. Johan Lang doesn't have the connections in the game. He came up from Aston Villa from the Championship with them. And, when it came to the point of wanting to kick on, he wasn't able to get them players in the door that they needed. They brought in Munchen. That's why they were able to get in, even in the room for Asensio, because that guy was at Sevilla operating for Emery for years. He's been around there. He has the contacts in the game. He knows how to get in the room and structure the deals, in favor of these guys to schmooze them and say, okay, we'll accept that. Johan Lang doesn't have that. Everyone looks at Johan Lang and says, who's this mug? We'll take advantage of him as soon as he walks in this door for negotiation. With Paratici, when he walks in there, he already puts them on the back burner. He's look, guys, you're not going to use. What are you going to do? You're going to keep paying his wages, or do you want to give them to us? And we can try and develop, bring him over here and take the gamble, see if he plays well and stuff like that. And if he does play well, by the way, we'll actually give you a fee for the guy. There's massive difference. And I've always said that, Johan Lang, I don't think he knows how to negotiate. And with us heading into the financial situation that we're heading into the summer, which I think is only going to be temporary. It's probably only going to be this window, even though it's not acceptable, especially where we are. This club needs massive investment on the pitch over this summer. But if we are cash stricken, like we're led to believe, you have to have a guy that knows how to manipulate the window, and that's Paratici. I'm sorry, Johan Lang has had 3 windows. It's more than enough to demonstrate that he doesn't know what he's doing. Since his 3 windows, the club has fallen backwards.
Yeah,
who's still without a club as well. Apparently, I've just been doing a little bit of googling. According to a report that came out in March, Gabonini is also still without a club and has apparently still been working behind the scenes, doing some bits for Tottenham as well. So they could be getting that. They could be getting the whole band back together.
Well, Paratici was an advisor for the 2 years at Tottenham. Even though he was banned, he was still an advisor to the club for the 2 years.
Yeah, and Dave, you talked about connections. Obviously Paratici's grounded in Italy, so that's kind of obvious. But it's also Spain, Germany, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia. I mean, this dude's connection isn't just Europe; it's worldwide. And as far as I'm concerned, that's absolutely fantastic. Because that being said, there's not going to be a place on the earth that's not going to be that's not going to be hiding under a rock. I absolutely love that. Because it creates a lot of creativity when it comes to this roster, and especially this offseason. To me, I don't know how you feel about that, but to me, I actually like that. It brings a smile to my face because for a while there's a couple teams that exclusively operate in Argentina and Brazil, always find gems out there, and then they bring them to the club, and within a year and a half, all of a sudden they're integral parts of their starting 11. Me personally, I like that about Paratici.
No, look, I've always been a big fan of Paratici. I always thought he was a smooth operator. People got swept up with what he done at Italy, but at the end of the day, the owners asked him to do it, and he came up with a plan to help them through it. Yeah, they got caught in the end, but just goes to show how intelligent this guy is to a large degree. Yeah, he broke the law, but it's not like the owners didn't ask him to. They knew exactly what they were doing with the financial troubles, but at the end of the day, the guy knows exactly what he's doing in that role. At the end of the day, when there's not loads of money there, he still knows how to get players signed. He still knows how to get players into the football club and stuff like that. And that's what your biggest asset is. Look, every manager lives and dies by the recruitment that's made for them. That's as simple as that. You make the wrong recruitment, things go tits up. You make the right recruitment, you push on. It's that simple. I've always said this: recruitment matters. The quality of players you're bringing in matter. And when I'm seeing us, some of the money we're spending on youngsters, we brought in Romero's and players like that for similar value. Look at the massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing about the Paratici coming back through the door is going to be the relationship between him and whichever manager is going to be coaching next year. Word came down that Paratici did not fancy the hiring of Ange Postecoglou, and he let it be known to certain people in that front office. Ange Postecoglou was hired anyway, and now we're in a position where there's a good potential we might be winning Europa League, which kind of throws a wrench into the system a little bit, because if Ange Postecoglou does finish this off and hoist Tottenham's first European trophy since '84. Now the question is Daniel Levy and Fabio Paratici going to let Ange Postecoglou walk out those doors, knowing that he just brought a trophy in a season in which, notwithstanding, there's 19 losses in the Premier League.
Drew,
you know what? I think that the board have actually been really, really clever with this, because we've all been saying, especially for the last year, how is this guy still in a job?
We don't.
Right, we know why, because it's taken the deflection off of them. But also, 100%. In doing so, they've also allowed Ange to dig enough of his own grave that I genuinely believe, when it gets to the summer, regardless of whether we win, I mean, if we don't win, then I think the writing's on the wall. But I think we win it. I think he's damaged himself enough and poisoned the chalice enough that if the board did go up to him and say, do you know what, mate, I'm sorry, this just, we really appreciate what you did, but it's getting a bit prickly, the writing's on the wall, and we really don't think you're the right guy, sorry. I think that they can fire him and then justifiably turn around and say, look,
to be no backlash.
Last few months of the season, you detested this guy. We've listened to you. We let him, we've got the trophy. We said thanks very much, but this is a reset. So I think they've actually been, I think that's other than the deflection of them not already getting the bullet, they've also allowed him to shorten enough of his rope that he's just hung himself. And you know what I mean? I hate to be that cynical. I hate to be that guy, but I think about it and I just think there are so many opportunities. They've been like, do you know what? This isn't working. But they've allowed it to get to the point now where they could probably fire him without much repercussion, regardless of the trophy win.
Look, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it's panned out that way, that they're sort of in a win-win situation. If he wins the Europa League, they can justify if they want to keep him. And if they don't want to keep him, even, they can justify getting rid of him without actually much backlash at all. But you also got to remember the times where people were calling for his head. How many players did we have injured? We could sit here and say, sack him, get another manager in. But we don't put ourselves in the other manager's positions. If you're another manager, you're not walking into Tottenham when you've got 10, 11 players injured and they're your best players. I'm sorry, you're just not. What chance have you got to get your feet off the ground? And if the next 3 months don't go well and you can't get it together because of all your best players are out injured, then you're also going to cost you your job. So what was the point of taking that gamble at Tottenham? Plus, we do how we operate and how notoriously we make it difficult for managers to get what they need. Again, they look at Tottenham and say, well, they need massive investment. They need great transfers, especially with the January window coming up. Do I back Tottenham to do that? No, they notoriously come out and say it's a very difficult window to operate in. Don't expect too much. So again, why would a manager leave what he's doing at another club? Because the managers you're bringing in, you got to remember, things are going well at their club. You're not bringing in a manager where things are not going well at their club. Things are going well. So when you put them in that situation, they're never going to sign on the dotted line. What they will say is, look, maybe come back to me in the summer. We'll have a conversation. But no, I'm not touching the job now. So in effect, they were never, ever going to pull the plug on Postecoglou back then because they didn't have anybody else of a decent caliber to be able to come in. That's just the harsh reality of the situation. Even coming towards the back end of this season, the fact that Postecoglou is out there providing a shield for the board, for the recruitment team, for all the players, why would anyone in the club want to get rid of him? It's perfect. Things are going so bad, and none of them have to take accountability whatsoever. And they're just letting this guy take the accountability. If you're Daniel Levy, you sack him now, you all of a sudden ramp up the numbers for the protests that are being organized. More and more people turn up for them. You keep him in until the summer or till the very last minute. Then you sack him. All of a sudden, then it's the transfer window. New manager, new players coming in. There's no games, there's no events on, so very little people are going to turn up to the protest because everyone's off doing summer holidays or relaxing from a shit show of the season. All of a sudden, you're in a new season. Everyone's hyped up again. So it's also timing. It's also that's why he's still in a job. And I've always said, if you people that have the question on why you want to know if Paratici is in a job or Postecoglou is still in a job, put yourself in the shoes of the guy that's sacking him. There's your answer.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that gets into our main topic. And of course, this week, there were a few articles that dropped going through detail by detail of Tottenham's financial situation. And it became clear to me that this is not a new problem. It almost feels like Daniel Levy has known this for the last couple seasons. And one of the interesting things about this article was the losses last season, the 2023-2024 cycle. Spurs actually ended up losing a considerable amount of money, and for the PSR cycle of 2002 to 2004. Spurs ended up losing $182 million. Now, a big part of that was the depreciation of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and one of the biggest debt carriers in the Premier League, if not the world. Basically something close to $1 billion carrying in debt. I think the number is 835 million. And then when you look at the transfers owed, I think it's hovering right around $276 million, which is, I think, $155.7 million up from an all-time low of $83 million from 2019. And then all of a sudden we come out and we hear that, Spurs are going to have to be sellers before they're buyers. Now, one of the things that I found interesting about this, Dave, it was the fact that all of this debt is amortized over a period of like 50 years. All the interest rate payments that are due on the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium don't even come into effect until 2045. And most of these transfer fees that are owed are also amortized as well too over the course of the life of the deal. Meaning nothing is really going to be paid up front. All of these things are structured at low interest rates, giving Tottenham absolute flexible. I don't know how you feel about this, but that being said, when I read it, I was like, well, wait a second. Okay, so the math necessarily isn't mathing. Is this? I don't know. The way that I looked at it was a fugazi, man. It seemed kind of fake. It almost felt like a smokescreen to me. It answered a couple of questions about where we're currently at. Number one, that Daniel Levy absolutely knew this was coming on the horizon a couple of years ago. That's number one. And number two, it answered why Ange Postecoglou still had a job. Yeah, 100%. And so I'm going to kick it off to you. And I just want to know exactly what your thoughts about this was, because what's kind of interesting about this is, Daniel Levy is not a stupid individual. That dude understands numbers, and he knows how to structure everything into his benefit. And when I heard that Tottenham were going to have to be sellers first, I'm like, well, wait a second. If you're screaming poor, but you have multiple outlets saying that most of all this debt is amortized, and it's going to be pushed out to a point where by the time payments are due, not only is it not going to be a problem, you're going to be able to cover it.
For me, look, I sort of believe it to a large degree, and the reason why I sort of believe it is we owe so much, we've amortized so much. There still could be a point where you still have to pay off so much, every month or every week or whatever way they've got it structured. Or maybe it's every year at the time, maybe the numbers that they're sort of dealing with. But you still got to meet them payments. But if you got to meet payments for the stadium, for the loans, for the loan you took off the government over COVID, for transfers, etc., that all then actually starts tallying up. I don't know exactly what they're paying out every year in terms of this, but if you keep structuring everything to that point, eventually all them small fees add up to one massive fee. And then when you look at how little we've recruited in terms of player sales, and that's where majority of your money comes in. That's where you earn the majority of your money is through your player sales. Look how very little resale value we've had on a lot of these players that we've let go. The amount of managers that we've hired and fired as well. All these things come adding up. And if you're not bringing in the revenue in terms of from them players and stuff like that, very quickly, the stuff that you're earning from match day and stuff like that, very quickly, that only puts you in a position where you are only covering your debts to a certain degree. So I sort of believe it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's more of a temporary solution. But, I've said this a long time ago. If you're not selling your players on for resale value, I mean, it's going to come back to bite you. And from my understanding, I think TalkSport done a great breakdown with Simon Jordan and some other guy on. But from my understanding, is the real problem around this summer transfer window is actually cash flow, which you do need to be able to operate and get some deals off the line and pay agents to get deals done and all that sort of stuff. That's where I understand the problem is. So you've got two ways out of that. One is investment, or two is getting Champions League, because apparently, that then sort of sets you up or three, Daniel Levy or Joe Lewis putting in money. Now, the Joe Lewis fund, they ain't going to put in money because from my understanding, they don't exactly know what they want to do right now. Daniel Levy, apparently all of his money, even though he's a wealthy guy, all of his money is tied up in ventures and stuff. So he doesn't actually have it to put into the football club. And I think Daniel Levy's come out with this because he hasn't secured the investment. So, and to your point, he's known this was coming. This whole thing actually cleared up a lot of my questions over the last 2 years. But if you take your mind back to 2021, when Daniel Levy first started looking for investment, he could see this coming down the line. He absolutely knew this day was approaching. That's why he's been out there. You look how many names he's been linked with looking for the investment. That's why he's been out there looking for it. He knew with the little resale value and everything else, and the amount of stuff he's amortized and all, eventually it was going to come to this point. He knew that. You've got to remember, he's a financial guy and he's a trained accountant. So he knows exactly, and you think these people aren't looking at, doing accounts for 2-3 years down the line. Of course they are. They know exactly what's coming. That's why they're in this game and stuff, because they can think like that. And when, what it clears up is, I sort of sit there and I go, okay, why are Spurs going down the route of signing so many young players? It's to get us through a period like this. you know, to future-proof Tottenham to get us through a period like this. Then I also sit there and I go, well, Ange knows Ange is sitting there talking about winning trophies. He's a guy that knows what sort of caliber of player you need to go and do that. But then he also comes out and he says, I'm okay with what we're doing in the transfer market, which then tells me when he went into that interview, Daniel Levy laid out the situation, the financial situation to him and says, this is what we can do for you. And Postecoglou wanted to crack at the Premier League so badly, he accepted it and he's willing to work with it. That's why he's not out there throwing Daniel Levy and that under the bus, because I think he knew exactly what he was walking into in terms of that. And also then it also speaks volumes to why he's still in a job, right? If there's that understanding with Daniel Levy and that agreement, then it also speaks to why he's still in a job despite what's gone on. So I think it clears up so many things for me. I also think it clears up why we chose to ditch off the Premier League when it looked like we weren't going to get European qualification. I think everybody, or certainly Postecoglou and Daniel Levy, I think there's a recognition. Go for the Europa League, put all your eggs in that basket because we need Champions League next season so we can fucking move forward, so we can avoid this situation. So I think there's been a collective between them, and that's why we've binned off the Premier League, and that's why fans haven't understood it, because Daniel Levy hasn't really come out with any clarity around it, which only pushes more people towards the protest. You know, if he came out and he actually said this, you know, last summer or when he signed that and says, look, this is the reality of the situation, yeah, he still would have had people protesting, but I do think there would be a majority, or not majority, but there would be people out there who go, you know what, he's being honest. I'm going to work with him through this to a certain degree. So he hasn't earned that because of the way he's handled it, which is pushing more people down to the protests and stuff like that. So look, I fully agree with you. I think Daniel Levy definitely knew it was coming, but I don't think it's horseshit. I think we are seriously in this situation this summer.
You know, one of the crazy things, Drew, is when you're looking over this, it's not necessarily about losses, because when you look at last year's losses relative to the average loss of a Premier League team, it was somewhere right in the middle. It wasn't exactly on the high end. It wasn't on the low end. And a lot of that was due to last year we didn't have Champions League. So it was 8 games we didn't have at the stadium, in a bigger stadium with bigger operating costs.
Steve,
so
that not posted losses for the last 4 seasons on the trot, though.
Yeah, correct. Right? Correct, but I mean the actual number of those losses relatively compared to losses of the big six clubs are very much below what would be considered what would be considered high losses. Sure. And a lot of that had to do last year compared to the fact that we didn't have European play last year, operating at a bigger stadium than White Hart Lane with far more employees. So you can understand there is going to be some operating loss, but the key here thing is revenue. Revenue, I believe, went up. Profits went up. The valuation of the club continued to climb. And to me, that's actually a big indicator that, okay, fine, you're going to have outlier losses. But that being said, this club still continues to gain, in revenue and profitability, right? So for me, maybe it's just me because I'm not necessarily an accountant. But that being said, the math doesn't necessarily math for me. Right? Why we're operating with such deficits when it comes to cash flow. Now, I guess some of that could be the fact that Tottenham is not really big on player sales, and when they do try to make a sale, generally speaking, it's going to be a loan. When we're trying to get rid of players, it's generally we'll loan out with an option to buy. It's not necessarily a straight out loan, or like last year's loan move with Højbjerg to Marseille. It was an obligation to buy on the back end. But that being said, money's still going to be coming in, right? So that's the thing. It's like, for me, the math is not mathing. There's still going to be a positive cash flow coming in. Whether it's going to be specifically in 2024-25 or the summer 2025, there's still going to be a positive cash flow income.
Is it enough, though, to operate in the transfer market? That's the thing.
Right.
You know, once you pay off all the debts that come calling, is it enough to operate in the transfer market? Just one player as an example, Ndombele. Paid what, nearly 80 million for him? What did we recoup for him? That's a massive 80 million deficit somewhere in the budget that has to be made up.
Right.
Right. Well, that was 100. Overall, that entire thing, I think, was like 120, 130 million, right? Because it was 67, 68 million transfer fee plus all of his wages. So that ended up being $120 million or 120 million pounds that we essentially just pissed up the wall. And I think while you're talking about all of this, you've got to appreciate that you're dealing with a chairman that has no appetite for risk, because the one time that he did show any appetite for risk we pissed it up the wall by spending money on Ndombele. I still say that Gio Lo Celso, I still think there's a player there. I still think we mismanaged him to a certain extent. I think we played him in the wrong positions because he's gone out to Spain, and I think the last time I looked, he was like 12 appearances, 7 goals and a couple of assists. So, he's not a bad player. I think one of the biggest issues is, on top of a deal like that, you've also got a club that, the last 3 big sales that we made that generated really any money for us at all: Gareth Bale, Kyle Walker, Harry Kane. Now that's just not good enough. Like, especially the time between those 3 players. We're talking pre-Poch, Poch, and last year. Like, that's what, 10, 12 years maybe almost for those 3. Like, it's just not enough. You look at people like Chelsea, you look at people like Manchester City, and they have Cole Palmer. He'd barely played for Manchester City. They got 47, 48 million for him, and that was pure profit. Do you know what I mean? Because he was a young player. You come from their youth, so you haven't got to pay a premium. You don't have to pay the tax. That's pure profit. So you do that once every other season with a couple of players. Don't fall in love with them and want them to be at the club for absolutely ever. And this is one thing, with Bergvall, I'll say I absolutely love the kid. I want him to be here for the next 10 years. But 3 years from now, if we're still this club and somebody comes in and offers 120 million for him, I'm sorry, for the benefit of the club, you take that money, you reinvest it, and you go and find the next 2 Lucas Bergvalls, and then you go again. It's just that's just the way the cookie crumbles. We're not Real Madrid. We're not Bayern Munich. We're not Barcelona. You know what I mean? I'd like to think that maybe one day, potentially, I saw a list the other day of all the teams in England, like the most championships to the least. We're not even on that list. Like, do you know what I mean? I think we won two titles. Like we're not. Let's not pretend we are something that we're not. I don't know. Pretend to know all the ins and outs of why the cash isn't there. But the one thing I will say is Levy will always put the finances first, and I don't think, even with a huge investment, I just don't see the guy ever truly pushing the boat out. You look at Aston Villa. We're never going to be 97% wage to profit ratio, or wage to turnover, wherever it is. We're never going to be that. But if we could safely get up to the 55-60%, I think part of the problem is that we're so inconsistent that, as an accountant, Levy wants to be able to project the next 5, 7, 10 years. And we've been so up and down. We've been so up
models
and down.
baked in.
Yeah, that he can't.
The thing
I think there's a genuine desire to try and do something. I just think when he's there at the table and he's about to push his chips in, something always makes him stop. And I don't know what it's going to take for him to stop stopping. And maybe it's Paratici, maybe it's to stop fucking flip-flopping, And to be fair, I'll just be my last point. The last time we flip-flopped was because Paratici got done and got banned, and we were going in one direction. It was all looking pretty good, and we had to zag over to another model because Paratici, whether you like it or not, he did a bad thing, got a slap on the wrist, and we were left holding our nuts a little bit. So Levy, for all intents and purposes, he had to pivot. So he went in another direction, and now, whether that direction was right or wrong, whether you like Scott Munn or you like Langer or not, he had to do something. And now maybe we're zigging or zagging back to Paratici in that model that we think potentially has some sort of benefit, or more benefit than the one we do. But it's not. I don't think it's all just Daniel Levy sitting behind his desk saying, "I'm going to make all the money and I'm not going to spend all the money." It's just. But yeah, I don't pretend to know why the money's not there. But like you say, maybe it's just a big old smoke screen. part of it may be smoke and mirrors. You obviously don't want to ever let people know exactly how much you've got in the bank. So maybe it's all just a clever play, and we're going to get to the end of the season and he's going to go 50 million for you, 60 million for you, 30 million for you, sell. And, you know, it's all a bit up in the air at the end of this year.
I think for me, when I look at the situation, it's transfer related. You know, he still owes 200 and nearly 80 million in terms of transfers. Now,
that's true.
You look, right, you look at a lot of the players that we bought and what we've actually recouped for them. Ndombele, Lo Celso, you know, you even go far back as Musa Sissoko. You know, when we let Toby Alderweireld leave, we got fuck all. Lloris, we didn't get anything for when he left. Matt Doherty left on a free. Aurier left on a free. Sanchez recouped very little. You know, Lucas Moura recouped very little. You got to remember, you know, we paid some massive fees for some of these guys. We paid transfer fees for these guys, and we haven't got anything back. You know, not only that, we've also laid out massive wages. But when, you know, if Daniel Levy, the way he is, he's not going to sit there and keep investing in transfers when he's got nothing coming in. And I think that's where our whole issue is. You know, we owe money for players that we didn't recoup anything. If we recoup something for it, Daniel Levy can go, right, well, there's 20 million wiped off future. I can guarantee now that's 20 million I can put to the transfer budget this summer. This is the way he sort of operates, you know. But the fact that he hasn't recouped anything, he still has to find the money to pay it, regardless whether he recouped or not. And I think that's where the big problem comes in. He's not going to keep pumping money into transfers when he's not getting anything back for what he's selling. Now, you would argue a lot of it is his fault. You know, mismanagement of the situation. Like if you're thinking in terms of your squad moving forward, you're offering players like Winks contract after contract when he was injured, raising his wages to a point that when you're looking to sell him, you know, it's very hard to get decent money for him. But us, because the clubs that are paying, they go, well, we could pay you 30 million, but we're only going to pay you 20 million because look at the wages he's on. We're going to try and subsidize that somehow. So the reality is it's transfer related. When you're not taking anything back in for the massive fees that you spent in the future, you're always going to put yourself in a situation where you have to go, I'll have to pull the reins this summer. We're going to have to try and be a little bit smarter, a bit more clever this summer, you know, because it can't keep doing this. Eventually, it's going to pile up. And that's where our issue comes in.
You know, Dave, I don't know how you feel about this, but I always look at Tottenham Hotspur kind of modeled after American teams. A lot of American owners put a lot of are very much risk averse, but they put a lot of emphasis in revenue and profit and the sustainability within the club. And then when you look at Daniel Levy, you know, he prides himself on club sustainability. The only difference between an American team and say somebody from the Premier League is you do have those additional revenue drivers with player sales and academy sales. And you would think that Tottenham would actually prioritize those two in these type of situations. But that being said, one of the things that I look at is debt, total debt, you know, debt to player, you know, player wage ratios and things like that. And one of the things that I found out about the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was the fact that it was not 100% financed. It was for like 55% financed through private equity, and ENIC threw in a lot of money to get that stadium project off the ground. And so when I look at revenue and profit, and generally how this works in America is that your free agency budget, or in this case, a transfer budget, is predicated off last season's profits, right? And so typically, usually how this goes is it's usually somewhere around 4 or 5% of your profit goes back into your transfer budget. But because ENIC threw in damn near $500 million to get that stadium project off the ground, one wonders is whether or not that percentage that goes into a transfer budget has been lowered, so it can pay itself back for the money that they spent to build that stadium. Like I wonder if that is a part of this equation.
Look, it probably is, but again, this is where fans get annoyed. You know, they're willing to put money into the stadium that when they resell the club, you know, that's going to be factored into what they're reselling it. So they're going to make it back regardless whether they pay themselves back, you know, through Tottenham's profits and whatever else, you know, over these last couple of years. When they sell the club, they're going to factor in the money they pumped into the stadium, the profits it generates, and they're going to put a price on it where they make their money back. These are financial guys. They're not stupid. So, correct. And this is where people's problems come in. You know, Tottenham, right now, we've been in a situation the last couple of years where we have needed, we've spent big money, but I'd argue we've needed to spend bigger. If you're a club trying to rebuild your whole squad, you've got to spend bigger than what we have. And this is where people's problems come in. Stop putting money into things that you know you're going to make it back on. and actually help the football club out for once. Go put your money into transfer players. Take the fucking risk. You know, because the reason why they're not putting them into transfers is because imagine if they finance that 80 million in Ndombele deal. They're never, ever making that back. It's too much of a risk for them. And that's why they won't do it. But right now, where we're at as a football club, we need it. They put some of the least funding into a football club than any other owners in the Premier League. And right now, we need it. And we're suffering because we're not getting it. And, you know, in order for them not to do it, they're looking for other people to take the risk. They're looking for other people to invest. And this is where people get very upset with their ownership, you know. So I've no sympathy towards them. I'm sorry. I've none whatsoever. Fine, great, put it in the stadium. When you sell this club, you're making it back. Right now, we need massive investment on the football pitch. Go and do that.
Drew? You want to jump on this? And you're muted, brother.
I can't really say any more than that, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, I think someone said it once. There used to be a football club over there, and those you know, those words have never seemed to ring more true. I guess I can understand why people are salty. I understand why people are pissed off. Is because we were told that the stadium was going to be a game changer, and I think the reality is, all it's done is help us keep up with the Joneses.
Well, worse on the football pitch.
Right.
The teams that they had at White Hart Lane for decades were better than what we've seen at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Right. And I think that's where the problem lies, is that the you know, the stadium generates more money, but that more money is just helping to look after the stadium. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think we were sort of promised that the stadium was going to take us to the next level in terms of a football. You know, I think the assumption was take us to the next level in terms of a football team. And the reality is, like I just said, all it's really done is help to pay for itself, help to generate income for itself, and help us to keep up with teams that we would otherwise struggle to keep up with. But we're still nowhere closer, you know, to the top than we were. We're just, everybody elevated, so we had to elevate as well, you know. So yeah, and I don't know what the answers are, man. As I say, I'm terrible at maths as well. I get it wrong all the time at work, so I'm better off asking me about stuff on the pitch.
Let's not forget also the fact that these fuckers spent years buying all the property around Tottenham Hotspur. And when they had the opportunity to try and move into the Olympic Stadium and move Tottenham out of Tottenham, they fucking tried it. And the only reason why they ended up building the stadium is because they lost out to West Ham in that bid. Let's not forget that, by the way. They would have happily took that Olympic Stadium, still owned half of Tottenham Hotspur, and moved forward. Let's not forget that. The only reason why they built the stadium in the end is because they lost out to West Ham on the Olympic bid for the Olympic Stadium.
That is very true. That is actually a very valid point. Last year, for the 2024-2025 summer window and the winter windows, Tottenham Hotspur's expenditure was 175.35 million pounds, ranking them 18th in the Premier League versus their income, which was 55.30 million pounds, putting them 17th for an overall net spend of 120.05 million pounds, which puts them in the latter half of the Premier League when it comes to net spends. That included everybody's favorite striker, Dominic Solanke, which was their prize of the summer window. I know you're laughing, Drew, but that really was the big signing.
The marquee, is that what they say? The marquee signing?
That's exactly right, man. In bright lights, man. Dominic Solanke's lit up like Las Vegas. The reality is like over the course of the last 5 years, this has typically been Tottenham's net spend, somewhere in that 100 to 130 million pound net spend. The interesting thing, though, is, a lot of people will put that down to COVID, but when you look at the 5 years prior, again, that is those figures with the inflation curve keeps them consistently in that net spend area. It almost seems like this isn't just something that's a one-off. It seems like it's a trend that Tottenham Hotspur really just will not push themselves into the upper echelon for whatever excuse, because White Hart Lane didn't have the revenue. You didn't have the revenue drivers, but now you're in a stadium that does have the revenue drivers, where it's a far different capacity. Not only that, but you talk about non-football expenditures. They're still trying to get a hotel built. to get themselves ready for the 2028 Euros, right? So it seems like every single thing that comes out from the sport's mouth has nothing to do with football, and continuous other paths of revenue streams coming into this football club.
Problem is, though, every season in the summer, or we can sit here and say, "Oh yeah, that's the net spend," but we're turning over our squad like we're a team being promoted from the Championship into the Premier League. We use that money to spend it on 7-8 players. We're never actually using that money to go, right, we need a cam. Let's try and go and get the best one we possibly can. We never use that. If we were using that money to fix 2 problems and had a set squad moving into the next season, fine. I don't think there's much you can argue. You can say at least they're trying. But the problem is we're making that spread over 7-8 players nearly every single summer. And there's your issue. You look at other clubs that maybe spend similar. They're not getting anywhere near half as many players in the door as we are for what we're spending. It's just embarrassing. Like everyone points out what we spend, but no one wants to look into what we've actually spent it on. Yeah, we've spent 130 million. The average going for a player is 50 million nowadays. Then outcomes we're getting in like 5-6 players. So if an average player is worth 50 million nowadays and you're looking at 130 million, that tells you should be getting in 3. But we're always getting in 6-7 out of that, which lowers the quality of the player you're bringing in. The reality is, in a lot of cases, the odd time you can get burned, but the reality is, in a lot of cases, you're paying for the quality. That's why they come with a premium. When you're paying low prices, you're taking a gamble. And that's what annoys me. Every window, they're taking a gamble with the players they're signing. When it comes to finances, they like to shore things up. Yep, sure thing. We'll take a gamble. We'll do that because we know we're going to make stuff back. But when it comes to players, I'm a firm believer. You spend the money on the right players. It's not a gamble. But every summer, we're signing in players that no one ever knows of. We still haven't to Google like Danny Rose told us. Everyone has to go out and find the information, the stats, and try and give their opinion off what they're seeing and highlight reels and stuff like that. And we're happy to take a gamble in the transfer window on cheap players rather than just actually try and buy the better quality player. You buy the better quality player, you get results on the pitch, you get better performances on the pitch, you're more exciting on the pitch, and then eventually that carries you to trophies. It's not rocket science.
The interesting thing is, and again, the comparison to U.S. teams, because how the U.S. model works, especially in the NFL. And now there are big differences because we don't have promotion relegation, so we don't have to worry about dropping out of the league. But that being said, the television revenue is so great in the United States. I think the NFL signed like a $52 billion television deal. Each team is guaranteed at least $135 million a year. And the way that the revenue model works in some of these leagues is that it doesn't even matter. Like back in the day, teams were very much dependent on their gate and their concessions and their parking and basically game day revenue. And now it's to a point where that is just the gravy on top, meaning that teams don't have an incentive to pay to win. There's no incentive to winning, right? They can, teams can finish in the bottom of the table and don't have to worry about it. To me, Tottenham is a team that operates exactly like an NFL team. There's no incentive to win. As long as they spend just enough to avoid relegation, potentially be a top 10 team, maybe fighting for the occasional Champions League team, that's going to be good enough for this team because it's going to drive revenue and profit. And at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. Meanwhile, fans like you and me that have been dying for trophies with this club, and you're watching a team that's largely risk averse. Prioritize profits over championships. To me, the comparison is the comparison is uncanny.
He lives off this utopia model that he can win leagues this way. But what we're finding out is everyone goes, oh, this team's going to get done, that team's going to get done. The reality is none of them are really going to get done. The only teams that will get punished for it are smaller teams like Everton because they could just say, look, shut up, take your liquor. When it comes to like some Man City, Chelsea teams like that, their owners, find smarter ways around it to beat the rules and stuff like that so that they can continue to compete up the top. Our owner finds a reason not to try and be the smartest guy in the room. It's like, they're the rules. I'm just going to stick to them. I'm only playing off the guidelines they set. I'm sorry. In order for you to make the money you've made to be even in the position to buy Tottenham, at some point along the line, you were smart enough to circumvent rules for your benefit. I'm sorry. So do that at the football club. The reason why he doesn't want to is because he knows it's going to cost too much money to do that. And then if he does it, fans are going to expect it all the time out of him. So he's never, ever going to put that expectation on himself. But the reality is, It's only him trying to play by the rules. You look at Nottingham Forest. Everyone goes, look at them out there spent. They're going to get done this, that, and the other. They won't be able to move in the summer, everything else. Look where they are now. He took a gamble. No one agreed with it. Everyone at the time said, look, you're spending over 100 million on players just to go down. Well, A, they didn't go down, and B, they've kicked on. They're now fighting for Champions League football. You know, so what you're seeing is more and more people buying football clubs and taking the risk. And it's paying off for them. And look where we are. We sit here and we go, oh, look at Todd Bowley, idiot, gonna get done stuff. Up there fighting for Champions League. We're sitting there down the 17th and everything else. The reality is, when it comes to the big clubs, people in the Premier League are never, ever going to punish them. They're the teams that represent the Premier League in Europe. They bring massive income to the Premier League. They bring the star players to the Premier League, which brings more eyes on the Premier League, more income for the Premier League. They're never going to sanction them, ever. They're always going to let them away with it. And that's where Daniel Levy needs to realise and start trying to circumvent the rules to a certain degree to himself. He's got to realise the value of Tottenham Hotspur, the eyes that it brings to the Premier League and stuff like that. Millions of fans around the world, and use it to his advantage like other people are doing when they own clubs.
You know, before I move on to the next question, I want to kill this notion that we're playing Moneyball. We're not playing Moneyball. The kings of Moneyball, the Oakland A's, what they do, their model of Moneyball is heavily dependent on stats, but also youth development as well too, because that's the Moneyball method, where a group of young players will come up once every 5 years. They'll surprise everyone by winning a division, but after that winning season, they sell everybody off, and the next group of young players will come right through the door, and they'll start the process over and over and over again. This team does not play Moneyball. This team plays this weird I don't even know what kind of, we play Levy ball. That's exactly what it is. It certainly isn't driven on the Moneyball stereotype. But if we've established that this is most likely going to be a sell before buy situation, what does that mean for Christian Romero this summer? I actually think this would be a colossal mistake to get rid of Christian Romero right now, especially with 2 years left, when we actually don't have to sell him. And I understand the position Romero's in, but that being said, money actually cures a lot of problems, because if this is a leverage play for Romero, with some of the comments that he came out, to me, I've seen this time and time again with players. They all want to be respected, and the best way that you can respect a player is by paying the money that they feel they deserve. And Christian Romero, whether you like him or not, he's a top 10 center back in the world, and he wants those wages reflected. And if that means that you have to break the $200K a week wage mark, then you're going to have to do it with certain players. You're going to have to finally make that decision whether you're going to build around a team, or this cycle is going to continue.
True. I know you love a Romero topic. We'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn, right? And I've said this over the last couple of days. Like, I love Romero to bits in terms of when he's on it, he's absolutely superb. And as a football club, no, of course, the last thing I want to do is push him out. If he's truly got heart-shaped eyes for Atletico and there's nothing you can do to change that, maybe you squeeze one more year out of him, maybe. But if they're really going to come, if they come with a 60, 70 million pounds, I mean, I think you just, the writing's on the wall. But I would love to think that if Paratici comes in and he can cook a little bit, maybe he can say to Christian, look, give me a year. Let me show you what, we can get back on track. I mean, I genuinely do. I think if they can really, really get to grips with that back five, I mean, I think that's as good as any back five in the Premier League on his day. Like when Porro's on it and when Udoghi's on it, Van der Ven and Romero. I mean, I don't want that to be broken up. So I think you do everything you can to persuade him to at least give you another year, or you get him to. It's going to be a lot harder if we don't qualify for next year. I think if we do qualify for next year, I think there's a very, very good chance he potentially signs a new contract. He goes above the 200K threshold. And I think you might find that there's a release clause in there as well for the next year or something, that, if X, Y, or Z team comes in for him, then he's allowed to, pursue another opportunity. That would be the way that I would try and play it out. I'd do everything I can to convince the guy, look, this was a one-off, this was an anomaly, this was crap. I mean, and I would expect him to take a little bit of the responsibility and be like, hey, dude, there's a couple of times this season you weren't exactly on it. Why can't we just draw a line under this and let's see if we can't, make something happen next year? But the one thing I will say, do you know what I mean? This squad, and everyone's going to have to get a little bit clued up, because I was screaming 10, 12 games ago to fight on two fronts, because there was still 30 million quid on the table, and there was still the possibility of getting into Europe through the league, and everyone sacked it off to a man.
People called you
pretty
mad.
Much, huh?
People called you mad.
I know, and I just, I just think it's unreal. So the one thing I will say is these guys need to grow a pair, man up a little bit, because you can't pick and choose when you decide to fight on two fronts. Like, the league is your bread and butter, and you should be fighting for that on a weekly basis to put a roof over your head, just like all of us go out and do our 9-to-5s or whatever we do. Do you know what I mean? That is your job. You don't just sack it off just because you can't get any further than the next place above you. That's not how this works. So if we do qualify next year, you best believe that I need to see like 9s and 10s performances, because we need to show up in the Premier League, and we need to put on a half decent performance in the Champions League, because there's no going down into the Europa League anymore. So, I just, that's the one thing that really has frustrated me about this lot. It's just like, I mean, I get it. You got to put all your eggs, because this is the situation we find ourselves in. But man, just across the board, everything's got to be better.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on there. And look, hopefully, seems like there's going to be a bit of restructuring this summer. So hopefully that's the case. But when it comes to Romero, look, I'm sort of resigned to the fact that Daniel Levy's going to use, we have to sell before we buy, to use that as a pass to sort of sell on Romero without any backlash to a certain degree, because you already see a lot of the fans turning on him, not liking the interview, questioning his quality, his commitment to the club and stuff like that. So I think it's one where he will actually sell and not actually get a lot of backlash. But for me, this is the test of the ownership. Rather than actually sell your best player to move forward, see if you can be smart and circumvent the rules to keep your best players here. See if you can find a way to appease your best players, actually, maybe. What really annoys me is there's so much riffraff around the squad that we can probably sell, to try and bring in one or two players, and with a bit of smart things by Paratici, the free market, loans with an obligation to buy down the line and stuff like that, we can still have a relatively decent enough summer. But I'm of the opinion, I think we sell Romero. We didn't have Romero this season, as much as people complain about. If we didn't have him this season, we'd be down in relegation zone. That's just the harsh reality of it. We wouldn't be sitting here thinking we're going to Bilbao. It was him that played the ball over the top to Madison that won the penalty in Frankfurt. It was him that also played that lovely ball over the top for Madison to put 2-0 up yesterday. People really underestimate the value and the quality of Romero. What really grinds my gears, and where I actually get more disappointed, because to be honest with you, Daniel Levy, I expect it. I expect him to find reasons on why he's doing it and try to justify it and stuff. Where I actually get let down is the backbone from the fan base on these situations. When we were selling Harry Kane, I'm sitting there questioning. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that we're probably in a position, but don't try and sit there and tell me that Tottenham are going to be better for it, because we're not. And I heard every excuse under the sun. He's going to play, Postecoglou's going to play this big, magnificent front three. He doesn't need a load of quality. You just give him bang average players, he's going to make it work. Is Harry Kane really that good? Is he getting worse? And stuff like that. Everything else, we heard all the same. And I'm hearing the same with Romero. People go to me, but is he really good, Dave? Is he really as good as you say? Well, I'm sorry, Atletico Madrid don't buy bad defenders, and Real Madrid don't either. They don't come calling for you if you're a bad player. So that should put the question about quality to rest straight away. But also, a player like Harry Kane, a player like Romero, who sit there and said, look, this is where I'm at in my life. I want to go and win trophies. All of a sudden, we get butthurt by it. Even though we sit there going into every single season, and the demands from the fan base is, I want to win a trophy. But yet, when a player wants to win a trophy and they don't see Tottenham matching that ambition, and they question whether they should leave or not, Get out my club. You don't want to be here. Everything else. And it's sort of like that. The guy's not saying that. The guy may love the football club, but if the club ain't going to match his ambition, you're leaving him in a rock and a hard place. Surely the whole conversation should be, okay, Tottenham, are you going to match his ambition? We want you to match his ambition because his ambition aligns with our ambition. And in order to get there, you've got to keep your best players. Anyone that debated me saying we're going to benefit from the sale of Harry Kane, they're all fucking wrong. And that's not coming from me. That's not me telling them wrong. That's time and evidence proving that we were wrong. Or not me, not we, sorry, they. That's time and evidence proving that they were wrong.
Right.
And the same will happen with fucking Christian Romero if we let him go. People could come to me and say, Radu Dragosin, the guy that run 20-odd games at centre-back, back-to-back, 20-odd games, he was fucking atrocious. Danzo, decent player, but he's nowhere near Romero's level. And this is the mistakes we were going to make. Oh, but maybe this guy... Look, it's took us so long to get a partnership from Toby and Jan. And the reality is, I think that defence is better. If you had a more defensive orientated manager, it'd actually probably be a rock solid defense. But the problem is you suffer going forward. You know, I think even if you want to play attacking football with a different manager, I do think that defense, again, if you had Pochettino in charge of that defense, that would be a very good backline, a very structured backline, not conceding most. But the reality is, if we want to win trophies, stop making it okay for the club to sell our best players. Start fucking putting pressure on them. I'm absolutely fed up with it. Oh, but we need the money and we're going to do this. No, we're not. We're going to sell Romero for 70 million and we're going to go, okay, we need a centre back, we need a right back, we need a left back. So that's 20 million in each position. I'm fed up with it. When are we going to learn a lesson? We sold Gareth Bale years ago. What did we get out of the 7 players that we bought? Very few of them worked out. And that's Tottenham's issue. You're not going, let's sell Gareth Bale and let's go and bring in another world-class player so we don't feel that massive drop-off. We go, right, we can fix all the issues at Tottenham and pay all the debts we owe this summer. I'm fed up with it. Keep your best players and fucking build a team around them. Stop, and as a fan, stop finding any excuse to fucking get them out the door. We make more, like, you know, when it comes to Ben Davies, I see more people delighted. We're going to extend his contract by a further year. Okay. But what's he going to offer to Tottenham next season? What's he going to offer when he's 34 years of age? But it's grand. He's happy to be here. I'm sorry, if I'm 33 and I'm on 80 grand a week and I know I'm not going to get it elsewhere, of course I'm going to be fucking delighted to be here. Of course I'm going to shut my mouth. Especially when my football ability doesn't, you know, I know I shouldn't be here. Of course I'm going to be quiet. Of course I'm going to enjoy myself. The only players that are picking up are the players that have ambition, and they're the players you want to be keeping. I'm fed up with it. But when it comes to someone like Romero, well, look at his injury record, look at this, look at that, and everything else. When it comes to Ben Davies, Dave, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to hear nuance. You just got to tell me he's a good player, and I'm absolutely fed up with it. Over the years, I've heard so much because look, I've been one of them. I came on heavily criticizing the players that we had at the time. A lot of people did not like it. I got a lot of people's backs up because of it. But the reality is, from what I'm seeing, we make more excuses to give players that don't work out. You know, and I'm not having a go at you, Drew. I'm just using what we
no
example. But like, you know, you go, oh, there's still a player in the Celso. Look, the reality is we signed decent enough players, but the amount of manager turnover and everything else, yeah, it probably does go wrong at Tottenham. But the reality is, from what we've seen Lo Celso's time at Tottenham, he's been nowhere near good enough. But people will still go, maybe we should give him another opportunity. But when it comes to our best players, thank you for your service, out the door, without any real proper discussions around it. And I'm fed up with it. When it comes to a bad player getting a new contract and I'm moan about it, I'm like, well, this stinks of, you know, absolutely piss poor. I know exactly what I'm going to get out of this guy for the next 4 years. He didn't deserve it. Shut up, Dave. There's a reason why he got a new contract, blah, blah. I'm fed up with it. Start getting a backbone and start demanding to keep our best players.
Yeah, you know, the crazy thing, and this actually drives me crazy because I always hear this conversation that strikers, the crazy thing is I hear this conversation quite a bit, that strikers, you know, strikers aren't a dime a dozen. They, you know, the best strikers in the world are very hard to uncover, but people don't realize how hard it is to find a center back pairing. That, you know, that you're going to be able to keep around for 4 or 5 years without having to chop and change, because maybe 1 year one guy looked great, but the next there's going to be a huge drop off, and so you're always constantly rotating either from the left center back to the right center back. It's very rare when you can get a center back pairing in place that understands each other's movement, that has the same football IQ, and you know, that just incredibly just have good chemistry and work together. one of the things that is the cornerstone of a very good team is the spine of the team, and that is your goalkeeper, your two center backs, and your center defensive mid working up the field. And one of the things that Tottenham has is a very good back three between their goalkeeper and their two center backs. And it's those three players, that you can build upon that can actually win trophies for this club. And it just boggles my mind that nobody talks about the center back position like they do with the striker position, because for every Harry Kane of the world, for every Victor Gyökeres that's out there, there's a whole bunch of trash out there as well too that look good in the French division, in Ligue 1 in France, or they look good in Serie A, or they look good in the Bundesliga, but that's their level. You know what I mean? Like, what's interesting about this is, like, I'll give you a good example, right? Timo Werner is a very good example of what I'm saying. In the Bundesliga, playing as a false nine, that dude had a season high, 3-4 years ago, Drew, of 28 goals when he was playing with RB Leipzig, makes the move to Chelsea and falls apart because, that's the thing, is he took a step up out of his comfort zone, probably knowing that the Premier League itself probably was maybe a step too high. And it all came falling apart. And that was a good example of sometimes strikers, sometimes strikers aren't a dime a dozen. And when it comes to center backs, it's almost the same thing. When you actually have a World Cup winning center back on your roster in the prime, working with a 24-year-old Dutch center back on his left side, and the chemistry and the continuity that those two have developed, they can be out for half a season with injury, but as soon as they step back on the field, not only do they go straight into the starting 11, but 3 games later, they remind you just exactly how world-class that pairing is. And the last thing you want to do is disrupt the last thing you want to do is disrupt Van de Ven's development career. He's only 24. He's not even in his prime yet. The fact that he has Romero sitting next to him makes him better. And now all of a sudden you want to get rid of the World Cup winner? Are you fucking serious?
It's ridiculous. Go on.
Here's the fucked up part. Daniel Levy is probably going to undervalue Romero and sell him for 60 million, 65 million when he's an 80 to 100 million, 180 million pound center back, and replace him with an aging Jonathan Tah from Bayern Munich who's going to be a free. That's I can see that happening this summer.
Yep.
Well, this is why I mentioned earlier about being scarred. The thought of the club scars you, because although I think we're all in agreement we should get rid of Basuma, I don't want to get rid of Basuma because I'm scared that we're not going to be even able to replace him with equal value. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And they do this to you all the freaking time. It's one of those things. Quickly, Steve, before I forget, Faz Radfire in the chat, 4-1, big up. Is that shirt, is that 11-12 season or 12-13 season? He was asking, the one that you're wearing.
This one that I'm wearing? It is 12. It is the 12-13 season, much like that jersey right there on the wall.
Gotcha.
And it is because the greatest U.S. men's national team player played for Tottenham Hotspur that one season.
Deuce.
Deuce. He had the fortune of playing with Gareth Bale. So
why don't you have any goalkeeper jerseys? Brad Friedel's or Casey Keller's?
That's a great because Tim Howard was better.
Oh,
Brad Friedel,
there you go. Big up, Paz.
By the way, Brad Friedel was an excellent penalty, an excellent goalie when it came to stopping penalties. But that being said, Tim Howard was the best.
But to your point, no, you absolutely. If you've got the opportunity to keep a Romero and a VDV, and especially, I hope to God, touch wood that his injury proneness is behind him. Hopefully they've maybe worked out. I mean, he said in an interview recently that he's been working on his style of running for a long time. Like, this isn't the first time they've had to kind of isolate this sort of situation. And I think he said that he was maybe, I don't want to put words in his mouth or read between the lines too much, but maybe he kind of slipped a little bit or just gotten too comfortable and kind of needed to readjust and kind of get back to practicing or get back to really working on how he runs and stuff. So let's hope that the worst of that is behind him. I can understand you saying maybe undervaluing Romero, but this is also Daniel Levy. So I can't, honestly, if he doesn't get the right amount of money for him, then he'll stay next season regardless of what any of us think. Like Levy will keep him until he absolutely has to. Whether that will be to the detriment of the squad, I don't know. There have been times this season where I've sort of questioned a little bit. I don't want to say he's down tools, but I feel like you do see his head kind of drop and he does seem a little bit despondent sometimes. But then, he's a World Cup winner. He expected more. We're languishing in the bottom part of the Premier League. And, so from that point of view, I can understand him being a bit pissed off with his work on a day-to-day basis. So, or having to go to work. So, but yeah, to your point, fantastic player. Don't want to get rid of him. It's the sort of defence we should be building around. And let's hope, as I say, so much hinges on the 21st of May. It's going to be 21st. Yeah, so much hinges on that as to whether we win or lose. That I just think, we can sort of talk because we enjoy talking about it, but the next couple of weeks, everything's up in the air.
Do you know what my biggest issue with selling Romero is? Before we end up bringing in Wilson Palacios to this club was known as having a massive soft underbelly, no one up for the fight, no real tough men in the team. You look at this team now, Romero's the only player we have like that out there. The only player. He crunches into challenges. Yeah, okay, there's the odd rash, stupid moment and stuff like that. I get it. But that's where you just need a good manager to say, look, when you are getting frustrated, channel that into your performance, become an even better player rather than your frustration. It's an easy thing to try and coach out the player. But at the end of the day, you take Romero out of this team, we will have a massive soft underbelly. 100% we will. You look at defenders that, came before him, the likes of your Dyers and Davies. Anytime a player ran at them, kept on dropping off, have a shot on my goal. Anytime balls come in the box, couldn't get their head on the end of things. Now, one thing that's gone under the radar, Romero, many people question last season, says, he's not great in the air. How many times this season has he been the first head in the box to clear that ball? He's improving, in my opinion, as a player. He's starting to become that guy. And you take him out of the team, we're a completely soft underbelly. Make no mistake about it. A lot of players don't like running at Romero. A lot of players don't want the ball in and around Romero because they know exactly what's coming. I remember being there for West Ham a couple of years ago. I remember he had Mikel Antonio. And all game, I watched Mikel Antonio run away from Romero. Didn't want to know. He set the standard. A couple of weeks later, I come back, I'm doing a watch along. He hit St. Maximum, Newcastle's most dangerous player everyone's afraid of. All of a sudden, he's taken off the pitch. Problem dealt with, And this is what Romero brings to you. You take that out of this Spurs team. You think we're already easy to play against? They're just going to keep running through us if you take him out of this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move on to West Ham, I do want to say Atrevon Wembley won. The point was that I was making that strikers don't grow on trees. And I can remember a time, and I don't know what the talk was over there in the UK, but when Timo Werner was banging in 20-plus goals for RB Leipzig 5-6 years ago, there was talk over here about how fantastic he would play in the Premier League, just his style of play. And it turned out to be completely false because he failed at Chelsea. Of course, he's failed at Tottenham Hotspur as well, too. And it just proves the point that not all strikers grow on trees, like some people want to say. There's a lot more.
There is also,
it's the same, and it's the same with center backs as well, too. It's not like for like.
I completely brushed over that point, and I meant to make it when you said that earlier on. The one thing I will say about Werner as well, in that one season that he was at RB Leipzig, it does say a lot about square pegs in square holes. He was in a team, in a position that was perfectly suited to his style. And as soon as you take him out of that and put him into a completely different system and a completely different style, I'm sorry, I feel like, he might... There's a very good chance that might have just been a one-off season, but I feel like Chelsea broke him a little bit as well.
100%. Because 100%.
Yeah, so there is something to be said about that as well. But yeah, sorry, I meant to make that point earlier when you said it.
He was playing in a two-striker system with Leipzig, playing the inside forward, almost that false nine role where he can just literally make runs at the back post, and he was absolutely positioned beautifully. I think he had like a 20-goal season and then a 28-goal season before making the move to Chelsea. And I 100% agree with the assumption that Chelsea broke him. But that's that's either here or there. Coming up this Sunday is West Ham United, and it is another London derby. I don't necessarily know exactly how up for the challenge that Tottenham Hotspur are in this London derby. The pride of London, I guess I heard it was the pride of London as well too. That being said, we've seen Spurs and derbies all season long when it comes to London derbies, and didn't necessarily exactly fare too well in these derbies. But that being said, we're at the point of the season where all their eggs are in the Europa League baskets. This upcoming Thursday. But that being said, they still have the Hammers this Sunday. Dave, I'm going to start with you. How many players are going to be wrapped in cotton this weekend, and how many changes are there going to be for Ange Postecoglou's side?
Look, we know the squad is going to be picked according to who's not going to play Thursday, right? Yes. The reality is, Richarlison came off at halftime. Maddison came off with after feeling his hamstrings. Anki came off after feeling something.
I think it's his knee, actually, though.
His knee.
Yeah.
Knee injury.
Madison. Yeah.
Lovely. So reality is we've got to protect our best players for that away trip. The fact that they scored that late goal leaves the game still in the balance. So look, you're potentially 90 minutes away from putting yourself into a game where you're 90 minutes away from lifting silverware. I mean, look, I'm sorry. We all said at the start of the season, at some point, there was going to come a point where you would have to pick, come near the end of the season, prioritize the Premier League or the Europa League. Now, the reason why the club ain't getting grace now is because if they would have done a better or made a better stab of it over the last few months and put more points on the board, I think many fans would be okay. No problem, all eggs in this basket this week. But the fact that we're so crap in the Premier League, people just want to see results at the end of the day. And look, the reality is the players that he's picking in some of these league games, the players that are on the periphery, I'm sorry. But if half of them are going out there not trying to leg, what are you not trying to leg for? You're not even in contention Thursday night. That's why you're playing. These players have a point to prove. If they want to keep themselves in the frame at Tottenham, go beyond this summer, and they want to be here at Tottenham, or they want to try and even get themselves into a position to even put themselves in Postecoglou's thinking for Thursday night. You use games like this against West Ham to go out and fucking perform. Regardless of what everyone else around you is doing. You take your matters into your own hands. Forget about what everyone else is doing. You go out and perform. You maximize your minutes. And this is my problem. At Tottenham Hotspur, it's been an issue I've had for quite some time. The minute a manager makes changes things up, he's setting us up to lose. Okay, so then them players that you argue with me over the squad players, and I say they're not good enough, then you're now admitting they're not good enough. He ain't setting us up to lose. Reality is, every manager has to make rotations. You can't pick the same 11 for 60 odd games all season long. He has to make rotations. And that's where your squad players come in importance. That's why we shouldn't be going, Davies is a squad player. He's not going to play too much. Just fucking give him his contract. Reality is he's going to play 20 odd games even as a squad player. Them 20 odd games, you lose 20, you lose them 20 games. I mean, look at the uproar now that we've lost 20 games. I'm not saying Davies being a part of it. But, 20-odd games is a lot for a squad player over the course of a season and stuff like that. And if you're bringing in these players, that's 20 games where the quality dramatically decreases. That's not the manager's problem. These players will sit there, they'll beg for minutes, they'll be knocking on his door, can I play this weekend, Gaffer, and stuff like that. They're all asking for it, but they don't maximize it. And then we sit here and we blame the manager. He's setting us up to lose. No, ask more of these squad players. They're out there for a reason because they're squad players. They've got a point to prove. If they're not proving their point, go after fucking them.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting considering that for most of Ange Postecoglou's tenure, fans have been screaming for a far more pragmatism than the gung-ho, swashbuckling, attacking style of Ange Postecoglou. I think over the course of the last 6 months, we've actually seen far more pragmatism to the point where we're not even really playing Ange ball anymore. We're playing some counter-attacking hybrid version of it. And a lot of that has to do with the players that are on the roster. I don't think they're actually capable of playing the style of football that Ange Postecoglou wants to play. That being said, I can see it. I actually look at the rest of this Premier League schedule as essentially a dress rehearsal for next year, because there's going to be a lot of players that we think are going to be in the mix, but it's actually going to be beneficial to them to put their best foot forward and as many minutes as they can, because whoever's going to be the next coach, whether it's Ange Postecoglou or somebody else, and if they're going to be on the roster, potentially their playing time next season is going to be predicated on how well they finish the season. So I'm talking about Pat Sarr. I'm talking about Brendan Johnson. Even in some context, Dejan Kulusevski, even though there might be a little bit of an excuse for him because he's coming back from injury. But that being said, Matisse Tell, I mean, the list goes on and on. A lot of Jed Spence, Kevin Danso, some of these guys that are going to get some run out for the rest of this season. It's going to be beneficial for these guys to maximize whatever minutes they're going to get for the rest of the season, because a lot of their play next year is going to hinge on how they finish the season. And if this is going to be just like, well, we're going to treat this as a friendly, well, buyer beware, because there's going to be a potential where they're not going to get a lot of run out next season, because the new manager, whoever the manager is going to be, is going to look back at this and say, well, did they really actually put in a hard 90, or did they just kind of lollygag around the pitch for 90 minutes against a team like West Ham? Me personally, I think this is absolutely a huge game for some of these squad players.
Yeah. It's a derby game at the end of the day. I mean, you go out there, you put in a performance like that. I'm sorry, I don't want to hear anyone moan about fans giving them a hard time and stuff like that. It's a derby game. I'm sorry. Chances are you ain't going to play Thursday night, so you leave it all out there. I'm sorry. I'm not giving them a free pass. I've been with Drew on this. You can't keep squandering away Premier League games. At the end of the day, it's an opportunity for these guys to show they're good 100%. Enough to be at Tottenham Hotspur. And if they're not taking it, that's on them. At the end of the day, if you're Andrew, any of us are in Andrew's shoes, I'm sorry, you're making changes and keeping your best players fit and available for Thursday, which means you're relying on your squad. So then it's up to them to perform. If they're not performing, that's on them.
Correct. Drew, your expectations for West Ham this weekend?
I mean, I'm exactly the same. I want it all left out there. I'm sick of it. You're supposed to be playing for some like the very least I want to see. I don't. If you lose 2-3-0, if we get a little bit of a spanking, I mean, I'm not going to like it. But if I see everybody leave everything out on the pitch and you're playing for the badge, then that's all I can ask for. But like Dave says, if you go out there and you start treating this like a training game, I keep on getting told that this is the strongest Spurs squad in years. I've yet to see that. Yeah. And I've just been disappointed week on week on week. And I know we've had the issues with the injuries, but I made this point last night. It seems to take our players so fucking long to come back from an injury. Nobody seems to be capable of hitting the ground running. And just,
do you know what the problem is there, though? Just on that, do you know what the problem is? As soon as they're 20-30% fit, we're throwing them straight back in, because the quality of the players we're using in their absence is a massive drop-off. So immediately, if you're a manager, even a 30% fit you is better than the shit that I'm watching out there. I'm putting you straight back in, which means you're not actually giving them time to get up to speed. If you've got a good squad, you can afford to give that guy an extra couple of weeks in training to be able to get up to speed, get back to having the touch of the ball, the feel of the ball, etc., etc. Our problem is, and we've seen it against Chelsea earlier on the season, because everyone else around them is so bad. As soon as Romero and Van de Ven were back fit, 20%, Postecoglou threw them in. And that's because your squad is shit.
Very true. So we don't. So after what 300-400 million over the last few seasons, a turnover of close to probably 40 players in and out, this squad is still really no better than it was. And yet I keep on getting fed this line. This squad, it's so much better than it used. Like I don't know, man. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a Mikey Moore for a few minutes. I know he's been carrying a knock, but I'd love to see if he's got 20-30 minutes in him. I'd love to see that. Yeah, I mean, even a couple of the other kids. I mean, where did Ajay go? I mean, maybe they're doing things in their respective leagues, and they'll be playing a game prior.
Under 21's campaign was over. There'd been massive drop off in the under 21's performances this season. They're nowhere near. Their season's done.
Right. Well, see, yeah. I mean, I just want to see. Yeah. I mean, I almost don't want to see it at all. Right? Do you know what I mean? We've been so bad in the league. I almost just want to sack it off.
But you know what, though, Drew? Right? I think you got a point about these youngsters. You look at the Europa League. Postecoglou put out teams out there, right, of the squad players to go and produce. They didn't. He brought on the youngsters. They were the shining light. The likes of your Scarlets, your Jays. Even when Moore was starting, he was the only player on the pitch that actually got Spurs fans excited. And this is where I think Postecoglou was letting stuff down. Actually, where I think a lot of managers let themselves down. He continues to use them rather than go, okay, look, I've given you, 3-4 opportunities now. I'm sorry, you're just not cutting it. You will be gone in January. Under 21 player, you'll come in and do. If you hit the ground running, I don't need to spend money. If you don't, I'll look to get someone else in this position. Postecoglou hasn't been brave enough in going, with some of these youngsters. You know, for instance, he kept on going with Ben Davies when he's had like Alfie Dorrington around. You know, give him the opportunity. Stop persisting with someone like Ben Davies. You know, I'm sorry, he's been okay this season, but there's a lot of times where he cost you as well. You know, stop persisting with other players out on the wings. If they're not producing, bring in a youngster. You know, we all sit here and talk about Udber's young, Tell's young. You got to give their time for their end product to develop. Well, Mikey Moore's come in and shown end product. He's 17. Ajayi's come in and shown end product. Look how young he is, you know, to a certain degree. And it's at the point where it's just like, if they're not producing, stop persisting and bring in under 21 players. Because all of a sudden, you will see players start going, oh, fuck, I better up my game. And the ones that don't, then you're weeding them out. You're like, right, get out of here.
Well, you also get a little bit of leniency. I mean, from the fans' perspective, you see somebody on, you know, somebody like Timo Werner on X amount of money a week, and he's not pulling his weight, and you see the coach actively say, all right, well, I mean, not out loud, but say, you know, kind of enough's enough, and all of a sudden we are seeing a youngster come in playing in place of it. I mean, there's that sort of underlying or unwritten, all right, well, you're playing with kids, we're going to give you a little bit more leniency, like you're trying to bed in a youngster, so therefore the expectation is that, all right, he's not going to be a 27, 28-year-old doing bits every week like you do. You're going to expect, you know, like your Lucas Bergvall. I mean, we wax lyrical about the kid, but Dave, how many times have we seen him turn into trouble and give away the ball that's led to a goal this year?
It's never.
I'm not going to get on it. I'm not going to get on his back, because he's going to learn. Like next season, he'll do that a couple of times less. And then next season, he'll do after that, he'll do a couple of times less, and he'll learn. You get much more leniency from your supporters if you're doing the best for the club and bedding in these kids or playing them, because the understanding is you're not being necessarily backed like you should be, or with the players that you definitely need to suit your system. So we'll be like, okay, well, he's doing the best he can with what he's got. But yeah, like you say, Dave, he's not done himself any favours. He's persisted with the likes of your Ben Davies or your Johnsons, even when he's kind of been off it. Although, you know, Johnson's not playing well and still manages to be our top scorer. I don't know how that makes my head go. But yeah, it's big up. What's up, lads? Big up. So yeah, I completely agree. He's not done himself any favors by not bedding in more of these kids than he could have. But then also, it's felt like there have been times where he has been close to, or like he's been trying to save his job. And there's an argument that the kids also, you run the risk if you play too many kids, then you could capitulate and you could end up on the receiving end of some real hammerings. But
I also think, although Drew, if you take that stance, I actually think a lot of the media appreciate a tough manager like that. I think the conversations then, I think he gets a bit of leeway. I also think the fans will go, do you know what? Fair play to him. He's weeding out the dirt. I'll give him a bit more leeway. I think that comes hand in hand.
Did, right?
But that's exactly what Pochettino did. You know, instead of keeping his fate in some of the players that we had, the likes of your Adebayors and players like that, he said, no, you don't want to run for me. Fine, no problem. You're not going to save my job. Bentaleb, Mason, people like that, up you come and out you go. And what did it do? It bought him time. It bought him time to be able to build it going forward, because many people went, do you know what? And they turned on the likes of your Adebayors and players like that. They're like, look, who the fuck do you think you are, not wanting to do what the manager wants you to do? Out you go. Fine, I'm okay with that. And it actually saved Pochettino his job, and it gave him the time to be able to build what he ultimately went on and built. He sort of built trust as well, to a large degree, with the ownership by doing that. And I think that's where Postecoglou has let him down. Sometimes you just got to take a stand and go, look, Levy, if you want this to work out, you've got to bloody trust me on this one, you know?
Right, yeah, and my mind always goes back to Archie Gray versus Liam Delap in the second Ipswich fixture when Liam Delap scored early, and it looked like it was going to be a mismatch versus Archie Gray. And 5 minutes later, Archie Gray had recognized it, and his football IQ took over and took Liam Delap completely out of that game for the rest of the way. When you see these type of players, especially young kids that actually can adapt so goddamn quickly. And let their instincts take over. It makes you wonder. Why Archie Gray isn't going to get run out. I understand there's going to be certain matchups where it's not going to fare well. But that being said, there's still no excuse why he can't run out for 20, 30 minutes in the second half. Just saying.
100%. And the reality is, sometimes experience isn't everything. You know, sometimes you can have a young player that can walk in and be better than the experienced guy, you know, because he can provide more to the team. He's just, you know, the experienced guy is sort of on his way out. There's a lot of stuff he can't do that he used to be able to do or whatever. You know, sometimes the young guy can come in, he can do all that, and he can really kick you on and add new dimensions, even if you take it back to Sunday League. How many people have been in the Sunday League team where this youngster walks in 16, 17 and he's skinning you alive? He's better than everybody on the fucking team. You know what I mean? Sometimes that can just be the case. And that's why you need to recognize that as manager and play him.
But it's also a boon to the senior players as well too. When a young kid who's coming out there with blinders on, who's actually playing at 100, his motor's at 110%. It also requires your senior players to play up to that level as well too, for their own personal pride. You know what I mean? You're getting outshone by an 18-year-old kid who was playing at Leeds last year. You know, you're going to have to step up your game. 100%.
I think that's why Bergval's been such a shining light, because I think there's been examples of that this season where he's almost sort of taken over the midfield, and you've seen the likes of your Bentancurs and people like that go, hang on a minute, are you James Maddison's? Like, well, I think I probably I can't let an 18-year-old outshine me, you know? So yeah, that can only be a good thing. Dave, just quickly, just in the chat here, Audio asks how the young Irish striker we've signed is getting on. I'm sure, does he mean Melia or Melia?
Yeah, Mason Melia. Look, he's not having a prolific season. I think he's got 2 goals, 2 assists so far across the campaign in 30 odd games. But I think, you know, the reason why Tottenham signed him is, and it was he's a young striker coming into the League of Ireland, you know, and I think last season he scored between 8 and 10 goals. Like, you know, I know the League of Ireland isn't the best of standards, but it's not known for a young striker to come in and be able to hold their own in the league, because it's sort of like a bully league to a large degree. You know?
I was going to say, I imagine there's a couple of big old centre backs not afraid to put their foot in, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know, so sometimes it's not the case where, you know, it's a lot of young strikers come in and they're paving their way and stuff like that. And I think to a large degree, you know, he's done well. One thing he's done is he's shown, and it's the way he's gone about handling it. He doesn't sit up there and battle them. He does enough to be able to hold off the ball, lay it, spin in behind. It's the things that he's actually doing on the football pitch to make himself compete at this level, sort of to a degree. The football IQ, it's probably level and above to what most young strikers are in the league. And that's why we've signed him. Also, when he went into the Europa League, he played very well for them in their European games as well. So I think that's why Tottenham have took the option to sign him. But look, it very well could work out the case it is with Josh Keeley. Tottenham signed Josh Keeley, came with a massive reputation from Ireland. You know, everyone talking about this guy in Ireland. But then since then, they've gone on and signed the likes of Kinski and players like that, you know, we're now to the point where Josh Keeley wants to leave this summer. It's not a case whether Tottenham want to keep him or not. He wants to leave this summer because his pathway is blocked. It very well could be the same with Mason Melia coming in. From my understanding, this guy's been promised he's walking straight into the first team. And the person that told me that speaks to his dad quite regularly. I told him, I said, make sure you go back and tell him that his son's been lied to. He's not walking into Tottenham and walking in to the first team. I'm sorry. I just do not see that. I don't think he's good enough to walk into Tottenham in first team either, quite frankly. He's a player that's going to have to come to England and you're going to have to develop him. So for me, I wouldn't expect this guy to walk in and make a massive impact. He's no Wayne Rooney. Make no mistake about it. But he is a player with huge potential if you can develop him right. But like we've signed Valise, we've had the likes of your Troy Parrots and stuff like that come through. When you're at a club like Tottenham and there's demands and pressures, how many managers at Tottenham are actually going to take their time out to develop a guy?
Right. We signed the next Wayne Rooney once, didn't we? Was it Terry Dixon? Was that?
Oh, young Terry Dixon, yeah, but he had massive injury problems, you know, at 16, 17, 18, because at one stage he was called up to the Ireland squad and he was only playing for Tottenham's academy, but he's had his injury problems ruined his career.
Well, gentlemen, we are up against it. We are 10 minutes over the 2-hour mark, and I'm sure, Dave, you have a schedule coming up that you have to keep, and I do want to thank you for stopping by quickly. What is on the schedule this weekend at the Irish Hotspur?
To be honest, I actually don't know. I was at a family function from yesterday all day. So to be honest with you, I just left it in Jack's hands. I don't know what he's got done, what he hasn't got done. I'm sort of waiting for him to wake up, and then we'll communicate on what we need to do. I think in the plans is definitely a members preview at some point today. And then apart from that, it's just more so getting ready for Sunday and then getting myself ready for the week, because there's no Jack for next week because he's over in London and I won't be joining up with him Friday. So the channel's left in my capable hands for a week. So I would urge people, it's probably going to be a bit of a shit show, but I will try my best in terms of trying to bring the professionalism to it or just not make so many mistakes and stuff. But yeah, look, coming up, fan show Monday. You know, you watch along in pre-game Sunday. You'll be there as well, Steve, with Drew. Mm-hmm. And then your fan show Monday. Then Wednesday, I think we'll do a debate show. And then Thursday is the Europa League. And then if we win the final, then I need to end the watch along early because I need to go and book Bilbao.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to see if we actually get to Bilbao before I decide to book a trip to Bilbao. Yeah. The problem is I have Seattle on the back end of the Memorial Day weekend. So the how I'm going to manage Bilbao and then Seattle, I have yet to figure out. But Drew, Spurs Diehards TTID, what's in the works this weekend, my friend?
I am going to be taking the rest of the day off to do some personal stuff. Tomorrow, got pre-game with Irish Hotspur, as always. I am doing Spurs Diehards TTID show next Friday, but before that I'm also helping Dave out and doing the European watch along, the away to Bodo on Thursday. So yeah, I'll be doing that.
By the way, Drew, I know you asked me yesterday could I come on. I couldn't because I was a family fan, and I can't do this Friday because I'm in London. But the following Friday I can come back on again if you need me.
All right, sweet. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, the odds of Dave hitting me up for Thursday, knowing that I'm going to be at work, I'm probably going to put that right around 65, 70. I'm just messing with you, Dave.
What you need to do is just book the day off work and then come and join us for the pre-match. Come for the
book
the day off work.
I did that 2 weeks ago. I took a Thursday off. I used a free day to watch the second leg in Frankfurt. I told everybody at work. Hopefully nobody's watching, but yeah, I told everybody at work I wasn't feeling well, but really it was just I wanted to watch football, so it is what it is. Maybe I'll do that this Thursday. We'll find out. But it worked out great because this last Thursday I got wrapped up with work at 2:30, and so I literally spent the rest of my afternoon watching the first leg in my office. So it worked out pretty well. I want to thank my employers for financing my Tottenham session. It was great. So just a quick reminder tonight, we on Tottenham Hotspur Till We Die, we have a members only show coming, I believe, at 4:00, and then later tonight at 7:30 Eastern, we have the MLS watch along. Inter Miami, that's right. It is the channel's first Leo Messi expose tonight as he takes on the New York Red Bulls. Oh, so nice. We're definitely going to do that tonight.
On the telly.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's going to be awesome watching Inter Miami absolutely curb stomp New York tonight. So definitely tune in for that as well too. And then of course on Sunday we have the pre-match, the watch along, and of course the final score for Tottenham versus West Ham. So there's a lot going on Stateside Footy this weekend. So definitely hit your like and subscribe buttons. Same with the Irish Hotspur and Spurs Diehard TTID. Go ahead and smash those likes and subscribe buttons. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I hope your Sunday goes well as well too. Just have a great productive weekend, and eat a lot of great food, and come on, you Spurs.
There you go. Big up everyone in the chat. Have a good weekend. Come on, you Spurs.
Yeah. Run them likes up. Have a good weekend.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.